When a woman is dragged through the dust for daring to run from her abuser, one stranger's decision shatters an entire town's comfortable silence. This is the story of Leon May, a woman accused of dishonor for the crime of wanting to survive, and Cole Hart, a broken man who found his purpose in the most unlikely place. What happens when mercy becomes an act of rebellion? When justice requires more courage than violence ever could. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The dust rose in lazy spirals under the noon sun, thick and yellow, like old parchment dissolving in water. Red Hollow was the kind of town that looked half-finished even after 20 years of settlement. Crooked wooden storefronts, sun-bleached signs, dirt streets that turned to soup when it rained and concrete when it didn't. It sat at the edge of nothing much, a waypoint between the civilized coast and the lawless territories beyond, which meant it attracted a particular type: people running from something, people with nowhere else to go, and people who liked it when nobody asked questions. Cole Hart fell into the first category, though he'd never admit which particular demons rode his back trail. He'd arrived that morning on a horse that looked as tired as he felt, both of them covered in the fine grit that came from 3 days of hard riding through country that had forgotten what rain looked like. The animal needed water more than he needed whiskey, so he'd headed straight for the livery, paid for feed and boarding, and then stood in the street for a long minute trying to decide if he had enough energy left to care about food. The saloon won. It always did. Cole was 42, but looked older in the ways that mattered. Lines carved deep around his eyes from squinting into too many hostile suns. A scar that hooked down from his left temple to his jaw. Hands that bore the permanent stains of violence no amount of scrubbing could lift. His clothes were trail-worn but maintained with the fastidiousness of a man who'd spent half his life in uniform. Dark trousers, a shirt that might have been blue once, a vest with tarnished buttons. No badge anymore. That part of his life had ended badly, and he didn't like thinking about it. He was halfway to the saloon when he heard the crowd. It started as a low rumble, the kind of sound a group of people makes when they're trying to be righteous and entertained at the same time. Cole had heard it before. At hangings, at whippings, at every public spectacle where regular folks got to feel superior to somebody's suffering. It made his jaw tighten, but he told himself it wasn't his business. He'd stopped making other people's problems his own after the incident in Blackwater, after he'd learned that playing hero usually just meant more bodies and a faster road to hell. Keep walking, he thought. Get your drink. Get some sleep. Be gone by morning. Then he heard the woman scream. It wasn't a scream of pain exactly. It was worse. It was the sound of someone who'd already been broken, who didn't have enough hope left for real defiance, but couldn't quite stop fighting anyway. Raw. Desperate. The kind of sound that bypasses your brain and goes straight to something older, something that remembers when humans were prey and that noise meant run or die. Cole's feet stopped moving. His hand drifted toward his hip, found the worn grip of his revolver, then fell away. He stood there in the middle of the street, dust settling on his shoulders, while his better judgment fought a brief, bitter war with whatever was left of his conscience. Conscience won. It usually did, which was why he stayed broke and haunted. He turned toward the noise. The crowd had gathered in the wide space in front of the general store, maybe 40 or 50 people forming a loose circle around something Cole couldn't see yet. Men mostly, but women too, and a handful of children who probably shouldn't be watching whatever this was. Some faces showed excitement, others showed the careful blankness of people who decided not to have opinions. Nobody looked happy about it, but nobody was leaving either. Cole pushed through the outer ring of onlookers, not gentle about it. A fat man in a storekeeper's apron gave him a dirty look but stepped aside. A woman clutched her shawl tighter and whispered something to her companion. Cole ignored them both. When he reached the front, he finally saw what they'd all come to witness. A woman knelt in the dirt, wrists bound with rough hemp rope, her hands purple from restricted blood flow. Her dress? Once pale blue, now streaked with filth and what looked like blood, hung off one shoulder, torn at the collar. Black hair had escaped whatever pins had held it and now fell in tangled curtains around a face that was all sharp angles and exhaustion. She kept her head down, but Cole caught glimpses of her profile. High cheekbones, a mouth pressed into a thin line, skin that probably had a golden undertone when it wasn't gray with dust and fear. Chinese, he realized. Or Chinese descent, anyway. That explained some of this, though it didn't excuse any of it. Standing over her was a man who had to be her husband, tall, thick through the shoulders, with the red face and broken capillaries of someone who drank more than he should. He wore work clothes that had been expensive once, boots with good leather, and an expression of righteous fury that didn't quite hide the satisfaction underneath. "You see?" The husband's voice boomed across the square, playing to the crowd. "You all see what kind of woman I married? My father warned me. Said they're all the same, can't be trusted, but I thought I could make an honest woman out of her." A few people in the crowd murmured agreement, others stayed quiet. The husband grabbed the woman's hair, yanked her head back so everyone could see her face. She made a small sound. Not quite a whimper, not quite a gasp, and Cole felt his hands curl into fists. "Tried to run off last night," the husband continued. "Packed a bag and snuck out like a thief. Would have made it too if Henderson's boy hadn't spotted her on the North Road." He gave her hair another yank, unnecessary, cruel. "Dishonored our marriage, dishonored me. Ain't that right, Sheriff?" The sheriff stood off to one side, a lanky man in his 50s with a tin star pinned to a vest that strained over his belly. He looked uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to actually do anything. "Well, Garrett, I don't know if we need to make such a Public's exactly what we need," Garrett cut him off. "Let everyone see what happens to women who forget their place, who forget what's owed." Cole had heard enough. He didn't make a conscious decision to move. His body just did it, muscle memory from years of stepping between bad situations and worse ones. 3 strides brought him into the circle. Silence dropped like a stone. "Let her go," Cole said. His voice came out flat, empty of everything except the promise of violence. Garrett's head swiveled toward him. Up close, Cole could see the burst blood vessels in his nose, the cruelty in his small eyes, the way his lips pulled back from his teeth when he sneered. "The hell are you?" "Nobody." Cole's hand drifted toward his gun, casual, like he was just resting it there. "Let her go anyway." "This ain't your concern, stranger." "It is now." The crowd shifted, restless. The sheriff stepped forward, hands raised in placation. "Now hold on, friend. I don't know who you are or where you're from, but this is a domestic matter between a man and his wife. Best you just move along." Cole didn't take his eyes off Garrett. Domestic matter. He tasted the words like they were spoiled. That what you call dragging a woman through the street like an animal. "You don't know nothing about it," Garrett snarled. He still had hold of the woman's hair, and now he gave it another vicious twist. She made a sound despite herself, and Cole felt something cold and familiar settle into his chest. "No, enough." Cole took another step forward. "You've got about 5 seconds to let her go before I make you." Garrett laughed. It was a big, performative sound meant to show the crowd he wasn't scared. But his other hand moved toward the knife at his belt, and his grip on the woman's hair tightened. "Big talk from a drifter who looks like he's been living in a ditch. You want to die for some Chinese whore who can't even—" Cole's gun was out before Garrett finished the sentence. It was a smooth draw, economical, the kind that came from 10,000 hours of practice. The revolver seemed to simply appear in his hand, and suddenly the barrel was pointed directly at Garrett's forehead, steady as stone. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. Half the people scrambled backward. Cole didn't blink. "Drop the knife. Let her go. Walk away." Garrett had gone very still, but his face had turned an even deeper shade of red. "You're making a mistake. Made plenty of those already. One more won't hurt." Cole thumbed back the hammer with a click that sounded like a door closing. "Last chance." For a long moment, nobody moved. The sun beat down. Dust motes hung in the air between them. Cole could smell his own sweat, sharp and sour, mixing with the metallic tang of fear coming off the woman in the dirt. Then Garrett's hand released her hair and came up slowly, both palms showing. All right. You've made your point." "Knife," Cole said. Garrett pulled the blade from his belt with 2 fingers and let it drop. It stuck point first in the hard-packed earth. "Now back up, 10 steps." Garrett took 1 step, 2. His eyes never left Cole's gun. "Sheriff, you just gonna let this happen?" The sheriff looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Well, that is, sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to lower that weapon." "In a minute." Cole kept the gun trained on Garrett until the man had backed up the full 10 steps. Only then did he ease the hammer down and holster the weapon. The crowd let out a collective breath. Cole moved to the woman, went down on one knee beside her. Up close, he could see the damage more clearly. Bruises on her arms in various stages of healing, a split lip that looked recent, exhaustion so profound it seemed carved into her bones. Her eyes met his for just a second, dark, suspicious, waiting for the next betrayal. "I'm going to cut you loose," he said quietly. "All right?" She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either. Cole pulled a folding knife from his pocket and sliced through the rope around her wrists. The hemp parted with a snap, and she brought her hands forward slowly, wincing as the blood returned to her fingers. The skin underneath was raw and bleeding. "Can you stand?" Cole asked. She nodded once, sharp, and started to push herself up. Her legs shook, but held. Cole stood with her, staying close in case she fell, but she managed it on her own. Pride, he thought. Whatever they'd done to her, they hadn't broken that. "This is outrageous," Garrett was saying, his voice rising to reach the crowd again. "That's my wife. I got rights. Sheriff, you gonna enforce the law or not?" The sheriff looked torn. "Well, technically nothing," Cole said, turning to face them. "You want to arrest somebody? Arrest him." He pointed at Garrett. "For assault, for unlawful restraint, for being a bastard, if there's a law against it." "She's his wife," someone in the crowd called out. A man's voice, indignant. "A man's got the right to discipline his own wife." Cole felt his temper, usually buried deep, starting to crack the surface. "Discipline." He looked at the woman's wrists, bleeding and purple. "That what you call it where you're from? It's what any decent Christian—" "Don't!" Cole's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Don't hide behind religion to excuse being a coward." Silence again. Heavier this time. The woman swayed slightly, and Cole caught her elbow. She flinched at the touch but didn't pull away. This close, he could see a brand on her left wrist, mostly healed but still visible. Chinese characters burned into the flesh. His stomach turned. "Sheriff," he said, "I'm taking her to get medical attention. You got a problem with that?" The sheriff's mouth opened and closed. No, I suppose not, but—" "Good." Cole looked at the woman. "Can you walk?" She nodded again, still hadn't spoken. He wondered if she was mute or just smart enough to know that silence was safer than words right now. They started moving toward the edge of the crowd. People parted for them, but not quickly, not willingly. Cole could feel their judgment like a physical weight, all those eyes adding up to a verdict they'd already decided. "This ain't over," Garrett called after them. "She's my wife, my property. You can't just take her." Cole stopped. He didn't turn around. "Watch me." "I'll have the sheriff arrest you for kidnapping." "Do it." Now Cole did turn. Just his head, just enough to pin Garrett with a look that had made harder men reconsider. "But you better make sure he brings help. Because I promise you, if you come after her yourself, it won't go how you think." Garrett started forward, fists clenched, and Cole's hand dropped to his gun again. "Garrett," the sheriff's voice, finally showing some authority. "That's enough. We'll sort this legal-like. Later." For a second it could have gone either way. Then Garrett spat in the dirt and turned away, shouldering through the crowd. "Should have known better," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Give them an inch. They take everything. Ungrateful. All of them." The crowd began to disperse. Slowly, reluctantly, people drifting back toward their business with backward glances and whispered conversations. Cole waited until most of them were gone, then guided the woman away from the square. She stumbled after a few steps, and this time when Cole steadied her, she leaned into it. Not much, just enough. "Where's the doctor?" he asked. She looked up at him then, really looked, and he saw something in her eyes he hadn't expected. Calculation. She was evaluating him, measuring risk, deciding if he was another threat dressed up as help. Smart woman. "No doctor," she said. Her voice came out rough, like she'd been screaming or crying, or both. There was an accent there, but her English was clear. "Saloon, please." Cole frowned. "You need medical saloon." Firmer this time, then quieter. "Witnesses. Need witnesses." He understood then. Going to a doctor meant being alone with him in a private room, and she'd learned not to trust being alone with men. But the saloon would be full of people. Safer. Smarter than he'd given her credit for. "All right," he said. "Saloon it is." They made their way down the street slowly, her leaning on him more with every step. By the time they reached the saloon doors, she was barely holding herself upright. Cole pushed through into the dim interior, and conversation died as every head turned toward them. The bartender, a thick-necked man with suspicious eyes, came forward wiping his hands on a stained apron. "The hell is this?" "Woman needs to sit down," Cole said. "And water. And whatever food you've got that won't kill her. I don't want no trouble." "Then there won't be any." Cole guided the woman to a table near the back, far from the door, where she could put her back to the wall. She sank into the chair like her legs had been waiting for permission to give up. The bartender brought water in a tin cup, and she drank it so fast she choked. Cole took the cup, refilled it himself from the pitcher the bartender left, and made her drink slower the second time. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't mention it." Cole pulled up a chair across from her, sat down, and finally got a good look at what Garrett had done. It was worse than he'd thought. The bruises he could see were just the start. There were older marks, too, faded yellow and green, telling a story of weeks or months of systematic cruelty. Her hands shook when she tried to hold the cup. The brand on her wrist looked like it had been done with a hot iron, deliberate and precise. And her eyes, Christ, her eyes held the kind of exhaustion that came from living in a war zone, from never being able to rest because rest meant vulnerability. "How long?" Cole asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. 8 months. "He always like this?" A bitter laugh, more like a cough. "Worse. At first he tried to be, careful, where it wouldn't show, then he stopped caring." "Why'd you marry him?" Her jaw tightened. "My father owed him money. I was the payment." Cole felt something dark and familiar stir in his chest. He'd seen this before, too many times. Women treated like currency, like livestock, their whole lives reduced to settling someone else's debts. It made him sick, but he'd learned a long time ago that being sick about it didn't change anything. "You got family?" he asked. "Anyone who could take you in?" She shook her head. "Father died last year, mother before that, no siblings, no one." "Friends?" "I had friends." Her voice went flat. Garrett made sure they stopped coming around. "What's your name?" She hesitated, like the question might be a trap, then said, "Leanne May." "I'm Cole." He didn't offer his last name. Lots of people had reasons to remember his last name, and none of them were good. "You got anywhere to go if you leave here?" "I don't know." "Money?" He kept it all. Of course he did. Cole sat back thinking. This wasn't his problem. He'd already stuck his neck out further than was smart, and every minute he stayed in this town increased the chances that someone would recognize him, would remember the name Cole Hart from wanted posters or newspaper stories about the Blackwater disaster. The smart play was to finish his drink, get some sleep, and be on his horse before dawn. But when he looked at Leanne May, small and broken in that chair, he saw every woman he'd ever failed to help, every time he'd arrived too late or been too weak or too compromised to make a difference. He saw his sister, who died while he was off playing lawman. He saw justice as a concept that only worked if someone was willing to fight for it. "Listen," he said, "I'm going to get you out of here, tonight if possible. But first we need to make sure Garrett can't just claim you back the second I leave. You understand?" Leanne May's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we need to make it public. Make it loud. Tell everyone what he did. Get witnesses on record. Make it so the sheriff has to act even if he doesn't want to. Otherwise this just happens again, to you or the next woman." Cole leaned forward. "But it's going to be hard. They're going to ask questions. They're going to judge you. Some of them won't believe you no matter what you say. You ready for that?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her ruined hands. Then she lifted her chin, and Cole saw something fierce spark to life behind the exhaustion. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." "All right then." Cole stood, moved to the bar. The bartender watched him warily. "Need something else?" "Yeah." Cole raised his voice, pitched it to carry through the room. "Everyone in here, listen up." The dozen or so patrons turned to look at him with varying degrees of interest and annoyance. A card game paused. A drunk at the bar stopped mid-sip. "This woman," Cole gestured to Leanne May, "has a story to tell, and I think you all should hear it." The bartender's face darkened. "I told you, I don't want trouble." Too late for that. Cole's hand rested on his gun, not threatening exactly, but making a point. She talks, you listen. That's all I'm asking. And if we don't want to? This from one of the card players, a lean man with a gambler's cold eyes. Cole smiled, and it wasn't friendly. Then I guess we find out how much you value your hearing. Silence stretched. Then the drunk at the bar laughed, a wet, wheezing sound. Hell, I'll listen. Ain't like I got better things to do. Others nodded, shrugged, went back to their drinks, but kept their ears open. Good enough. Cole returned to the table, pulled his chair around so he was sitting next to Leanne May instead of across from her. Solidarity. Whenever you're ready. Leanne May took a breath that shook going in. She clasped her hands together to stop the trembling, then seemed to realize that just made the damage more visible. She left them on the table, palms down, and started talking. My name is Leanne May Zhang. I was born in San Francisco. My parents came here from Canton before I was born. My father was a merchant, a good man, honest. Her voice was soft but steady, each word chosen with care. 5 years ago, he borrowed money from Garrett Hayes to expand his business. The investment failed. My father couldn't repay the debt. What's that got to do with you? The gambler called out. Cole gave him a look that could freeze water. Leanne May continued as if he hadn't spoken. When my father died, Garrett said the debt passed to me. He said I could work it off, or, she paused, swallowed, or I could marry him, and the debt would be forgotten. Generous, someone muttered. I thought so too at first. Leanne May's laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. I thought he was offering me mercy. I was alone, grieving, scared. My mother was already gone. I had no money, no prospects. So I agreed. And then? Cole prompted gently. And then I learned what kind of man Garrett Hayes really is. Her hands curled into fists on the table. The first time he hit me was our wedding night. I'd smiled at another man during the reception, the pastor, when he congratulated us. Garrett said I was making a fool of him, disrespecting him. She touched her ribs, unconsciously protective. He broke 2 ribs that night. The saloon had gone very quiet. I told myself it was my fault, that I needed to learn, be better, more obedient. Leanne May's voice dropped. He told me the same thing, every time, that I'd made him do it, that if I just tried harder, been quieter, prettier, more grateful, he wouldn't have to discipline me. That's between a man and his wife, the bartender said, but there was less conviction in it now. Is it? Leanne May looked directly at him. Is it marriage when he brands you like cattle? She held up her wrist, showed the room the characters burned into her flesh. Is it marriage when he locks you in a room for days without food because you spoke out of turn? When he... Her voice cracked. She took a moment, gathered herself. When he invites his friends over and makes you serve them, and they put their hands on you, and he laughs. No one spoke. I tried to leave once before, she continued, 3 months ago. I made it to the edge of town. He found me, dragged me back, and locked me in the cellar for a week. No light, no food, just water once a day. When he finally let me out, I couldn't walk right for a month. Cole felt his jaw ache from clenching it so hard. Last night I tried again. I'd been saving scraps of food, hiding them. I had a small bag. I waited until he was drunk, until he passed out, and I ran. Leanne May's eyes were dry now, past tears. I almost made it. I really thought I'd made it. Then they caught me. And brought you back, Cole said. Yes. Garrett was furious. He said I'd humiliated him, that I needed to be made an example of so no other women in Red Hollow would get ideas. She looked around the room at faces that wouldn't quite meet her eyes. So he tied my hands and dragged me through the street. He was going to whip me in the square, in front of everyone. The sheriff was going to let him. That's a lie, someone started to say, but Cole's hand hit the table so hard glasses jumped. Don't, he said softly. Don't you dare. Leanne May kept going, momentum carrying her now. You all saw it. You were there. How many of you watched? How many of you said nothing? Did nothing? Her voice rose, sharp with anger that had been buried under fear for too long. You knew. All of you knew what was happening to me. Mrs. Chen, you lived next door. You heard me screaming at night. Mr. Peterson, you treated my broken arm 6 months ago. You knew those bruises weren't from falling downstairs. An older man in the corner looked down at his drink, ashamed. And you, Lian Mei pointed at the bartender. Garrett comes in here every week, brags about keeping his Chinese bitch in line. You laughed. I heard you laughing. The bartender's face had gone red. Now hold on. No. It was Cole who spoke now, standing. You hold on. You all hold on and listen to what she's saying. Because I've been through a lot of towns like this one, and you know what I've learned? The people doing the worst things aren't usually the ones with guns. They're the ones who see evil happening and decide it's not their problem. He let that sit for a moment, watching it land. You want to know who I am? Cole continued. Used to be a marshal. Blackwater, Colorado. Maybe you heard about that. Things went bad, and they went bad because I believed in the law more than I believed in doing what was right, because I thought order mattered more than justice. He took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. I was wrong, and it cost people their lives. That's why you interfere here? The gambler asked. Trying to make up for past mistakes? Maybe. Cole put his hat back on. Or maybe I'm just tired of watching men beat women and calling it tradition. The saloon doors swung open then, and Garrett walked in with the sheriff and 3 other men. They fanned out, blocking the exit. Garrett's face was dark with rage, but the sheriff just looked tired. All right, the sheriff said. That's enough. Garrett's filed a formal complaint, says you assaulted him and kidnapped his wife. Cole Hart. And yes, I know who you are. You're under arrest. Cole didn't move. On what charges? Assault, kidnapping, disturbing the peace. That's enough to start. I didn't kidnap anyone. She came with me willingly. She's his wife. She doesn't get to be willing. The sheriff pulled out iron manacles. Now you can come easy or hard, but you're coming. Lian Mei stood up fast enough that her chair scraped back. No, I'm the one who asked him to help me. He didn't assault anyone. Garrett was exercising his rights as a husband, the sheriff interrupted. Now, sit down, Mrs. Hayes. Don't call me that. It's your legal name. It's a cage, Lian Mei spat, and I'm done living in it. One of the men with Garrett, young, muscled, probably a ranch hand, stepped forward. Boss says you're coming home. Now. I'm not going anywhere with him. Wasn't a request. The ranch hand reached for her. Cole moved to intercept, but the sheriff pulled his gun. Don't. I'm warning you. Everything hung on a knife's edge. Then Dr. Peterson, the old man in the corner, stood up. His voice came out rusty with disuse and shame. She's telling the truth. Everyone turned to look at him. About what? The sheriff asked. About the arm. 6 months ago, she came to my office, said she'd fallen, but I've been doctoring for 30 years. I know the difference between falling and being thrown. He looked at Garrett. The bone break was consistent with defensive trauma, like she'd tried to protect herself. That's private medical information, Garrett snarled. Not when it's evidence of a crime, Peterson shot back. It ain't a crime to discipline your own. I also treated her for 3 broken ribs, a fractured cheekbone, and burns consistent with cigarette torture, Peterson continued, his voice getting stronger. And that brand? That was done with a custom iron. I've seen burns like that on cattle and slaves, not wives. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Doc. And I kept quiet about it because I was a coward, Peterson said, looking directly at Lian Mei. Because I told myself it wasn't my business. I'm ashamed of that. But I won't lie about it anymore. A woman near the bar stood up next, Mrs. Chen, presumably. She was small, older, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. I heard the screaming every night for months. I went to the sheriff twice. He told me it was a domestic matter. It was, the sheriff protested weakly. I saw him drag her by her hair into the house once, Mrs. Chen continued. Saw the blood on her face. I did nothing. We all did nothing. She looked around the room. And now we're going to keep doing nothing? Silence. Then another voice. I served them at the restaurant once. A young waitress, barely 20. Garrett ordered for her, wouldn't let her speak. When she tried to eat, he slapped her hand away, said she didn't deserve food because she'd embarrassed him somehow. I thought it was strange, but you didn't say anything, Cole finished. The girl looked down. No, sir. More voices now, a dam breaking. I saw her at the general store with bruises. Heard Garrett bragging about breaking her like she was a horse. She tried to talk to me once, ask for help. I walked away. Each confession drove Garrett's face darker until Cole thought he might actually have an apoplexy right there in the saloon. This is ridiculous, Garrett finally exploded. You're all going to take the word of a lying Chinese whore over mine, over a white man who's done nothing but try to civilize her? Civilize? Lian May's voice cut through his bluster like a blade. You branded me, starved me, beat me until I couldn't stand, locked me in darkness until I forgot what sunlight looked like. You didn't try to civilize me, Garrett. You tried to destroy me. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is that you thought you had the right. She stepped forward, and even Garrett took a step back. See it. I'm done, she said simply. I'm leaving Red Hollow tonight. And if anyone tries to stop me, if anyone tries to drag me back to that house, I'll kill myself before I let you. The room went silent. You're bluffing, Garrett said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Lian May picked up a knife from the nearest table. Just a dinner knife, dull and ordinary. She held it to her own throat, steady as stone. Try me. Jesus, the sheriff breathed. Cole moved slowly, carefully. Lian May, put the knife down. Not until they promise. Promise what? That I can leave. That no one will follow. That I'm free. Her hand didn't shake. Promise, or I end it right here, and you can all live with knowing you drove me to it. All right. Cole's voice was soft, gentle. All right. I promise. You can leave. We'll leave together. Tonight. No one will stop us. The sheriff won't do anything. Will you, Sheriff? The sheriff looked at his boots. This is highly irregular. Is that a no? Long pause, then, no, I won't stop her. Garrett? Garrett's face was purple now. She's my wife. My property. I'll have the law. The law's right here, Cole interrupted, nodding to the sheriff. And he just said he won't stop her. So unless you want to try taking her by force, and I really, really hope you do try because I would love an excuse, she's leaving. Garrett looked around the room for support and found none. Even his ranch hands had backed away, unwilling to die for someone else's obsession. Fine, he snarled. Take her. She's worthless anyway. Couldn't even give me a son. That's because I chewed herbs to prevent it, Lian May said flatly. Every month. I'd rather die than bring a child into a house with you. Garrett lunged. Cole's fist caught him in the solar plexus, doubling him over. Before anyone could react, Cole had Garrett's arm twisted behind his back and his face pressed into a table. That's for every time you hit her, Cole said quietly, directly into Garrett's ear. Every time you made her scared. Every time you made her feel less than human. He twisted the arm a little more, felt something strain. You're getting off easy, remember that. He let Garrett go, and the man collapsed to the floor, gasping. Cole turned to Lian May, who'd finally lowered the knife. You still want to leave? Yes. Then let's go, now, before anyone changes their mind. They walked toward the door, the crowd parting like water. The sheriff didn't move to stop them. Neither did anyone else. Cole kept himself between Lian May and everyone else, just in case. At the door, Lian May paused. She looked back at the room full of people who'd watched her suffer. I hope you remember this, she said. I hope when you go to sleep tonight, you remember that you knew, and you did nothing, and maybe next time you'll be braver. Then they were through the doors and into the evening air. The street was darker now, the sun having slipped behind the mountains while they'd been inside. Shadows stretched long and thin, turning Red Hollow into something that looked almost peaceful if you didn't know better. Cole kept his hand near his gun and his eyes moving, scanning windows and alleyways for threats. Lian May walked beside him, quieter now that the adrenaline was fading, her steps uncertain. We need to get your things, Cole said. Whatever you can't live without. I don't have things. Not really. Everything in that house belongs to him, or he made it very clear it was only mine to use at his pleasure. She wrapped her arms around herself despite the warmth. There's a photograph of my parents, in a drawer by the bed. That's all I want. Then we'll get it. He'll be there. Probably. Cole glanced at her. You up for that? Lian May was quiet for several steps. Then, I faced him in front of the whole town. I can face him in his own house. They turned down a side street away from the main road. The houses here were larger. set back from the street with small yards and picket fences that pretended at respectability. Garrett's place was the third one down, a two-story structure with peeling white paint and windows that reflected the dying light like dead eyes. Cole stopped at the gate. "You don't have to go in. I can get the photograph." "No." Leon May's voice was firm. "I need to do this. I need to walk into that house one last time and walk out again by choice." He understood that. Understood the need to reclaim something, even if it was just a moment. "All right, but I'm right behind you." The front door was unlocked. Leon May pushed it open and stepped inside, and Cole followed her into a house that smelled like stale beer and unwashed dishes. The interior was nicer than he'd expected. Good furniture, rugs, oil paintings on the walls, but there was a staleness to it, like a place where nothing living ever happened. They found Garrett in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a bottle of whiskey and a glass. He didn't look up when they entered. "Come for your things?" he asked the bottle. "Just one thing," Leon May said. "The photograph." Garrett did look up now, and Cole saw that he'd been crying. His eyes were red, his face blotchy. It didn't make Cole feel sorry for him. "You always did care more about them than about me. They loved me. You never did." "I tried." Garrett's voice cracked. "I tried so hard to make you into a proper wife, to fix you, but you were always stubborn, always willful." "I was always human," Leon May interrupted. "That's what you could never accept, that I wasn't a doll or a dog. I was a person with my own thoughts and feelings, and you hated me for it." Garrett poured more whiskey with a shaking hand. "You made a fool of me tonight, in front of everyone. You made a fool of yourself. I just told the truth." "The truth?" He laughed, bitter and wet. "The truth is you never tried. Never gave us a real chance. From the first night you looked at me like I was something dirty you'd stepped in." "You broke my ribs on the first night," Leon May said flatly. "What exactly did you expect?" Cole stayed by the door, letting this play out but ready to move if needed. His hand rested on his gun. Garrett drank, set the glass down hard enough that it cracked. "I loved you. In my way. I gave you a home, food, protection. What more did you want?" "I wanted not to be beaten. I wanted not to wake up every morning wondering if today would be the day you killed me." Leon May's voice was steady, but Cole could see her hands trembling. "I wanted to be treated like a human being instead of property. Those were my impossible demands. Other women manage just fine. Other wives understand their place and don't make trouble. Other women are probably just as miserable as I was. They're just better at hiding it." Leon May moved toward the stairs. "I'm getting the photograph. Then I'm leaving. Don't follow me." She disappeared up the stairs, her footsteps creaking overhead. Cole and Garrett sat in silence, listening to drawers opening and closing. "You ruined my life," Garrett said after a while. "No," Cole replied. "You did that all by yourself. I just stopped you from ruining hers any further." "What are you, some kind of saint, riding in to save the poor helpless woman?" "I'm nobody's saint, but I know wrong when I see it, and what you did to her was about as wrong as it gets." Garrett's hand moved toward something under the table. Cole's gun was out and cocked before the hand got halfway there. "Don't," Cole said quietly. Garrett froze. "Just getting a handkerchief." "Use your other hand, slowly." Garrett complied, pulling out a dirty cloth and wiping his face. "You're going to take her away from here. Probably head south. Think you're going to save her, make everything better. I'm going to give her a chance to save herself. That's all. She'll never be free of me. I'll find her. I'll make her sorry." Cole stood, walked over to the table and leaned down so he was eye level with Garrett. "Listen to me very carefully. If you ever come near her again, if you ever so much as think about hurting her, I will end you, not arrest you, not turn you in, end you. Do you understand?" Garrett's face went pale. Whatever he saw in Cole's eyes convinced him this wasn't a bluff. "I understand," he whispered. "Good." Cole straightened. "Now sit there and drink yourself into oblivion like the pathetic bastard you are, and count yourself lucky that I'm feeling merciful." Leon May came back down the stairs holding a small framed photograph. In it, a young couple stood in front of what looked like a shop, both dressed in their finest clothes, both smiling. The woman had Leon May's eyes. "Got it?" Cole asked. She nodded. "Then let's go." They were almost to the door when Garrett spoke again. You'll regret this. Both of you. Mark my words. Cole didn't bother responding. They stepped out into the evening air, and Leah May pulled the door shut behind her with a finality that sounded like freedom. Where now? She asked. Now we get supplies and horses. Then we put as many miles between us and this place as we can before morning. Cole started walking back toward the main street. You ever ridden a horse? A few times. Not well. You'll learn. We don't have much choice. They stopped first at the general store. The storekeeper, the same fat man who'd been in the crowd earlier, looked nervous when they walked in but didn't refuse their business. Cole bought dried meat, hardtack, coffee, 2 canteens, a bedroll, and a coat for Leah May. He paid with coins from a dwindling stash and didn't haggle. You folks leaving town then? The storekeeper asked, trying to sound casual and failing. What gave it away? Cole replied, not looking up from counting change. Garrett's not going to like it. Garrett can choke on his own bile for all I care. The storekeeper wrapped their purchases in brown paper, tied it with string. For what it's worth, what you did today, not many men would have had the stones. Yeah, well, not many men should need stones to stop a woman from being tortured. They left the store and headed for the livery. Cole's horse was there, along with a dozen others. The stable hand was a kid, maybe 16, with acne and nervous hands. Need another horse, Cole told him. Something steady, doesn't have to be fast, just reliable. The kid glanced at Leah May, then quickly away. Got a mare. She's old but sure-footed. $30. 20. 25. Deal. Cole counted out the money. Saddle and tack included? Yes, sir. While the kid prepared the horses, Cole checked his own mount, making sure the saddle was tight and the hooves looked good. Leah May stood off to the side, still clutching her photograph, looking small and lost in the lamplight. You all right? Cole asked quietly. I don't know what I am. She looked at him. This morning I woke up in that house thinking today would be like every other day. Afraid but resigned, and now she gestured helplessly at the horses, at the supplies, at the world beyond Red Hollow. Now I don't know what happens next. Next we ride. After that we figure it out as we go. That's not much of a plan. It's the only one I've got. The kid brought out both horses, fully saddled. The mare he'd sold them was brown with a white blaze, docile looking, her eyes calm. Cole helped Leah May mount, showing her how to hold the reins, where to put her feet. Just stay relaxed, he said. She'll do most of the work. You're just steering. Leah May settled into the saddle with visible discomfort, but didn't complain. Cole swung onto his own horse, a gray gelding that knew him well enough not to make trouble. Which way? Leah May asked. South. There's a town called San Aurelio, about 5 days' ride. Big enough to get lost in, far enough that Garrett won't follow. You've been there? Once. Long time ago. They rode out of the livery and down the main street one last time. A few people watched from windows and doorways, faces pale in the lamplight, but nobody tried to stop them. The sheriff stood outside his office, arms folded, and gave Cole a long look as they passed. Cole nodded to him. The sheriff nodded back. Understanding passed between them. Stay gone, and we'll call this finished. At the edge of town, Leah May turned in her saddle to look back at Red Hollow one last time. The lights were coming on in windows, smoke rising from chimneys, the whole place settling into evening routines like nothing had happened, like her suffering had been just another Tuesday. I hate them, she said quietly. All of them. For knowing and doing nothing. Yeah, Cole agreed. That's fair. Does it get better, the hate? I'll let you know if I ever find out. They rode into the darkness, following a road that wound south through scrubland and low hills. The temperature dropped as night came on full, and Cole heard Leah May's teeth chatter despite the coat. They kept riding anyway. Distance mattered more than comfort right now. Around midnight, Cole found a spot off the road where rocks formed a natural windbreak. He called a halt, and they made a cold camp. No fire. Too risky. Cole spread his bedroll and gave it to Leah May along with the new one. Take both, he said. You need the warmth more than I do. Where will you sleep? I won't. I'll keep watch. For what? For anyone stupid enough to follow us. Leah May settled into the bedrolls, wrapping herself tight. She looked very small there, curled up against the cold, still holding that photograph. Cole sat with his back to a boulder, rifle across his knees, and watched the road. "Cole?" Her voice came out of the darkness. "Yeah?" "Why did you help me?" He was quiet for a while, listening to the wind move through the scrub brush. "Lots of reasons, none of them very good." "Tell me one." "I had a sister once, Emily. She married young, married bad. Her husband was like Garrett, all charm in public, all fists in private. I was off being a lawman, thought I was doing important work. By the time I came home to visit, she was already gone. Fell down the stairs, they said. Broke her neck. But she didn't fall. No, she didn't fall." Cole's hand tightened on the rifle. "I knew it. Everyone knew it. But her husband was well connected, and there was no proof, and the law, the same law I'd sworn to uphold, decided it wasn't worth pursuing. So he walked free, and she stayed dead, and I learned that sometimes the law and justice aren't even on speaking terms." Leon May was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But you still carry it." "Yeah, I guess I do." He looked up at the stars, cold and distant. "When I saw you in that street today, I saw her. Saw every woman who ever got hurt by a man who thought ownership was the same as love. And I thought, not this time. This time, I'm not too late. You could have died. Garrett had men. The sheriff could have arrested you. Could have. Didn't." Cole shrugged. "Sometimes you just have to bet it all on doing the right thing and hope the cards fall your way. And if they don't, then at least you went down trying." They fell silent again. An owl called somewhere in the darkness, hunting. Cole's eyes adjusted to the starlight, and he scanned the horizon for movement. Nothing. Just empty land and emptier sky. "Cole?" Leon May's voice was drowsy now, sleep pulling at her. "Yeah?" "Thank you. Get some rest. Long day tomorrow." Within minutes, her breathing evened out, and Cole was alone with his thoughts and the night. He thought about Emily, about all the choices that had led him here, about the look in Garrett's eyes when he'd realized he couldn't hold on to what he thought he owned. He thought about justice and how rare it was, how you had to make it yourself most of the time because the world sure as hell wasn't going to hand it to you. Sometime around 3 in the morning, he heard horses. Cole was on his feet instantly, rifle up, moving to wake Leon May with a hand over her mouth so she wouldn't make noise. Her eyes snapped open, wide with fear. "Riders," he whispered, "coming from Red Hollow. Stay down. Stay quiet." She nodded, and he removed his hand. They both listened. 3 horses, maybe 4, moving at a steady trot. Not fast enough to be law with arrest warrants, but not slow enough to be innocent travelers either. Cole moved to the edge of their camp, using the rocks for cover. He could see shapes now on the road, dark silhouettes against slightly less dark sky. They slowed as they approached where Cole had turned off, and one of them dismounted to study the ground. "Tracks here," a voice called out. "Young. One of Garrett's ranch hands, probably." "How fresh?" Another voice, older. "Few hours. They camped close." Damn. Cole had hoped they'd ride straight through without checking. He should have been more careful about covering their trail, but Leon May had been half dead with exhaustion, and he'd prioritized speed over stealth. "Spread out," the older voice commanded. "Find them." The riders separated, moving off the road into the scrubland. Cole cursed silently. 4 men against 1, with a woman to protect who couldn't fight. The numbers weren't good. He had 2 choices: hide and hope they missed the camp, or take the initiative and hit them first while they were spread out. Hiding seemed smarter, safer. But if they found the camp anyway, Leon May would be in the crossfire. Initiative, then. Cole moved low and fast, circling wide to come up behind the nearest rider. The man had dismounted to search on foot, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the darkness. He never saw Cole coming. A rifle butt to the base of the skull, and he went down without a sound. 1. Cole took the man's weapon, checked the load, and moved toward the next target. This one was still mounted, sitting easy in the saddle, looking the wrong direction. Cole aimed carefully, accounting for wind and darkness, and fired. The shot cracked across the night, and the rider jerked and fell. His horse bolted, spooked by the noise and the sudden absence of weight. 2. "Contact!" someone yelled. "East side!" Gunfire erupted from 2 directions at once. Cole threw himself behind a boulder as bullets sparked off rock around him. He returned fire, not aiming to hit but to keep them pinned. to make them think twice about rushing him. "Fall back," the older voice shouted. "Regroup." The shooting stopped. Cole listened to boots running, horses moving, men calling to each other in the darkness. He counted voices. 2 left, maybe 3, if the one he'd clipped had survived. "You're outnumbered, Hart," the older voice called. "We got men coming from town. Best you just give up the woman and ride on." Cole didn't answer. Talking just gave away positions. "She ain't worth dying for. Hell, she ain't even white. Just some Chinese whore who's more trouble than she's worth." Still nothing from Cole. "Fine, we'll do this the hard way." More gunfire, sustained now, both remaining shooters pouring lead at where they thought Cole was hiding. He was already moving, low crawling to a new position while they wasted ammunition. When they paused to reload, he popped up and fired twice. 1 scream, 1 curse. He'd hit something. 3. Maybe. The last man broke. Cole heard him running, heard a horse whinny, and hooves pounding away north. Smart. Cole would have done the same. He waited 5 minutes to be sure, then made his way back to camp. Lian Mei was exactly where he'd left her, flat against the ground, hands pressed over her ears. "It's over," he said. "They're gone." She sat up slowly, shaking. Are they? 1 dead for sure, 1 wounded bad, 1 knocked out, 1 ran. Cole started breaking camp, packing their things with quick efficiency. "We need to move, now. More will come." "Where do we go?" "Off the road, cross country. Harder travel, but harder to track." He helped her onto her horse, handed her the reins. "Stay close, don't fall behind." They rode hard through the remaining hours of darkness, pushing the horses as much as he dared. The terrain got rougher, all rocks and gullies that could break a leg if you weren't careful. But it was that or stay on the road and wait for the next group of Garrett's men to catch up. Dawn found them 10 miles south and 5 miles east of the road, in country so broken and empty it looked like the end of the world. Cole finally called a halt in a dry creek bed where cottonwoods offered some shade and concealment. Lian Mei practically fell off her horse. Cole caught her, steadied her, and she clung to him for a moment before pulling away, embarrassed. "Sorry," she muttered. Nothing to be sorry for." Cole tended to the horses first, giving them water from a stagnant pool and what little grain he'd thought to bring. Then he sat down beside Lian Mei, who looked like she might shatter if he touched her wrong. "You killed that man," she said. "Yeah. Because of me. Because he was trying to kill us. That's different." "Is it?" She looked at him with those dark, exhausted eyes. "A man is dead because I tried to escape my husband. How is that different?" Cole was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "A man is dead because he chose to hunt down a woman who'd been tortured and help drag her back to her torturer. He made that choice. I just made sure he didn't get to finish it." "You're very good at justifying violence." "Yeah. Had a lot of practice." He leaned back against the creek bank, feeling every one of his 42 years. "Look, I'm not going to tell you this is simple or clean. It's not. What happened last night was ugly, and there's going to be more ugly before we're clear. But here's the thing. You did nothing wrong. You tried to save your own life. That's not a crime. That's not shameful. That's survival. Tell that to the man's widow, his children. If he had children, he should have thought about them before he signed up to terrorize a woman for money." Cole closed his eyes. "I know it's hard. I know you want to be the kind of person who never causes harm. But sometimes harm is what happens when evil runs into resistance, and you can't let that make you feel guilty for resisting." Lian Mei pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. "I don't know how to do this. Any of this. I'm not strong like you. I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn and too mean to quit." He opened one eye to look at her. "And you are strong. You faced down your abuser in front of a whole town. You told them all the truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet. That takes more courage than shooting some fool in the dark ever will." "It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like terror that won't stop." "Yeah, that's what courage usually feels like." They rested through this heat of the day, taking turns sleeping while the other kept watch. Cole woke in the afternoon to find Lian Mei sitting cross-legged in the shade, looking at her parents' photograph. "Tell me about them," he said. She glanced up, surprised. "My parents?" "Yeah." Lian Mei was quiet for a moment, then started talking in a voice so soft he had to lean closer to hear. "My father was a dreamer, always had some new scheme, some opportunity that was going to make us rich. Mother was the practical one. She kept the books, managed the money, made sure we ate even when Father's dreams didn't pan out. A small smile. They fought sometimes, loud, passionate arguments in Cantonese that I only half understood, but they loved each other, really loved each other. I saw it in how he brought her tea every morning, how she mended his shirts with tiny, perfect stitches. They were good people. The best. They worked so hard to give me opportunities they'd never had. Paid for English tutors, music lessons, everything. Father wanted me to marry an American, someone respectable, climb the social ladder. Her smile turned bitter. He got his wish, I suppose, just not the way he imagined. He couldn't have known what Garrett was. Couldn't he? He was desperate, drowning in debt. Garrett offered him a way out. I think Father knew exactly what kind of man he was. He just chose not to see it. Lian May traced her finger over her mother's face in the photograph. Mother fought it, told him I was too young, that something felt wrong about Garrett. But Father was proud. He couldn't admit failure, couldn't accept charity. So he convinced himself it would be fine, that Garrett would treat me well, that it was a good match. And your mother? Died 6 months before the wedding. Fever, quick and brutal. I think, Lian May's voice caught. I think she knew what was coming, knew I'd need to be strong. Her last words to me were in Cantonese. She said a bamboo bent by wind does not break. She meant I should be flexible, survive however I could. I'm not sure she'd be proud of how I survived. She'd be proud you're alive. That's all that matters. Maybe. They rode on that evening, still keeping to rough country, but angling back toward the main road. Cole figured they'd put enough distance between themselves and Red Hollow that it was worth risking the easier travel. Lian May was holding up better than he'd expected, but he could see the toll in how she moved, how she flinched at sudden sounds. 3 days passed like that. Riding, resting, riding again. They spoke little, both conserving energy for the journey. Cole shot a rabbit the second day, and they had their first hot meal, roasted over a small fire that he doused before full dark. Lian May ate like someone who'd forgotten what real hunger felt like, and Cole didn't comment when she licked her fingers clean of grease. On the 4th day, they saw San Aurelio in the distance. It rose out of the desert like a mirage. A real town, bigger than Red Hollow, with actual streets and buildings that didn't look like they'd fall over in a strong wind. Adobe structures mixed with newer wooden construction, church spires reaching toward the sky, people moving about their business. Lian May stared at it like she'd never seen civilization before. That's where we're heading? She asked. That's it. What happens when we get there? We find you a safe place to stay, get you cleaned up, fed properly. Then we figure out the next step. What's the next step? Cole didn't have an answer for that. He'd been so focused on getting her away from Red Hollow that he hadn't thought much past arrival. Now, looking at this woman who'd lost everything and everyone, he felt the weight of what came next settling on his shoulders. We'll figure it out, he said, more confidently than he felt. They rode into San Aurelio as the afternoon sun turned everything gold. People glanced at them. Trail-worn strangers always drew attention, but nobody stopped them or asked questions. Cole found a hotel that looked clean enough, paid for a room with more of his dwindling cash, and escorted Lian May upstairs. Lock the door, he told her. Don't open it for anyone but me. I'm going to stable the horses and get us some supplies. Where will you stay? I'll find somewhere. Cole? She touched his arm, hesitant. Thank you for everything. Thank me when this is all over and you're safe. He left her there and headed back out into the street, trying to ignore the feeling that he'd just made a promise he might not be able to keep. Cole found a boarding house 2 streets over that rented rooms by the week and didn't ask questions. The landlady was a weathered woman in her 60s who looked him up and down with eyes that had seen every kind of trouble a man could bring and decided he was acceptable enough. He paid her $3 for 7 days, took the key to a room that smelled like old soap and loneliness, and didn't bother unpacking the few things he owned. Instead, he went looking for work. San Aurelio was big enough to have options, but small enough that word traveled fast. Cole hit 3 saloons, a freight office, and a ranch looking for hands before he found something that would pay. The freight office needed a guard for a run-up to the mining camps in the hills. 2 days there, 2 days back, decent money for someone who knew how to handle a gun and didn't mind sleeping rough. When do you leave? Cole asked the freight manager, a nervous man with ink-stained fingers. Day after tomorrow, dawn. I'll be here. He collected in advance, enough to buy food and pay for Lee and May's room for another week, and headed back to the hotel as the sun was setting. He knocked on her door twice, identifying himself, and heard the scrape of furniture being moved before she opened it. She'd bathed. Her hair was clean and pulled back, and she'd somehow found or bought a simple dress that actually fit. She looked different. Still exhausted, still carrying the weight of everything that had happened, but cleaner. More like a person and less like a refugee. You moved the dresser in front of the door, Cole observed. Old habit. Garrett used to... She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter. It matters. But you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. He handed her the money he'd set aside. That's for the room. I found work, so I'll be gone a few days. There's enough there for food and whatever else you need. Lee and May looked at the bills in her hand like she'd forgotten what money was. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I do. Why? Because you need help and I can give it. That's reason enough. She was quiet for a moment, then looked up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're a strange man, Cole Hart. So I've been told. Most men would expect something in return for this kind of generosity. Cole felt his jaw tighten. I'm not most men, and I'm not doing this to get something from you. I'm doing it because it's right. Right. She tested the word like it was foreign. I'm not sure I know what that means anymore. Means helping people who need help. Means not looking away when someone's hurting. Means giving a damn even when it's inconvenient. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was taking. Look, I've done plenty of wrong in my life. More than my share. But this is something I can do that's good, and I'm going to do it. That's all there is to it. Lee and May studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Thank you. Again. I seem to keep saying that. Keep saying it as long as you need to. Cole turned to leave, then paused. There's a restaurant 2 blocks south, Chen's Chinese place. Woman who runs it is decent, doesn't gossip much. You should eat there. Food's good, and it'll be familiar. You've been asking around about me. About places you might feel safe. There's a difference. After he left, Cole spent the evening checking the town, learning its rhythms, figuring out where trouble might come from. San Aurelio had the usual frontier mix, honest folks trying to build something, opportunists looking to take advantage, and a criminal element that operated in the spaces between law and chaos. The sheriff here looked competent enough, and the deputies carried themselves like they knew what they were doing. Good. That meant if Garrett or his people showed up, they'd have to be careful about it. Cole found a cantina that served passable food and worse whiskey, ate alone at a corner table, and listened to conversations swirl around him. Nobody talked about Red Hollow. Nobody mentioned a Chinese woman or a manhunt. That was something, at least. He was halfway through his meal when 3 men walked in who made his instincts scream. They weren't dressed like ranch hands or miners. Too clean, too well armed, moving with the casual confidence of people who'd hurt others and gotten away with it. One was tall and lean with a scar that bisected his left eyebrow. One was shorter, built like a bull, with hands the size of dinner plates. The third was medium height, medium build, completely forgettable except for eyes that never stopped moving. They scanned the room, and Cole knew they were looking for someone. He kept eating, kept his head down, but his hand drifted to the gun at his hip. The 3 men talked to the bartender, showed him something, probably a description or a photograph, and the bartender shook his head. They tried 2 other patrons with the same result, then left. Cole waited 5 minutes, paid his bill, and followed. They were easy to track. 3 men who didn't care about being subtle, walking down the main street like they owned it. Cole kept to the shadows, watching as they hit 2 more saloons and a boarding house, asking the same questions, getting the same answers. They were looking for Lee and May. Had to be. The question was whether they were Garrett's people or bounty hunters, or something else entirely. It didn't much matter in the end. Any of those options meant trouble. Cole watched them check into a hotel, the same one where Leon May was staying, and his blood went cold. Coincidence, maybe. But he'd stopped believing in coincidences around the same time he'd stopped believing in justice. He waited until they'd gone to their rooms, then slipped into the hotel through a side entrance. The clerk was dozing at the desk, didn't even notice him pass. Cole took the stairs two at a time and knocked on Lian May's door. "It's me," he said quietly. "Open up." The furniture scraped again, and she let him in. Her eyes widened when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" "We need to move you. Now. Tonight." "Why? What happened?" "3 men just checked into this hotel. They're asking around about a Chinese woman, showing people something, probably a description. Could be nothing. Probably isn't." Lian May's face went pale. "Garrett sent them. Maybe. Or maybe they're just opportunists who heard there might be money in finding you." Cole started gathering her few belongings. "Either way, you can't stay here." "Where do I go?" "Boarding house where I'm staying. Landlady's discreet and the place is off the main streets. They won't think to look there right away." They moved quickly and quietly, slipping down the back stairs and into the alley. The night air was cool, carrying the smell of dust and cooking fires. Cole kept Lian May close, one hand on her elbow, the other on his gun. They made it 3 blocks before one of the 3 men stepped out of a doorway ahead of them. It was the forgettable one, the medium-built man with the searching eyes. He smiled when he saw Lian May, and it was the smile of a cat that had cornered a mouse. "Well now," he said, "this is convenient." Cole moved in front of Lian May. "Keep walking, friend. This doesn't concern you." "I think it does. See, I'm looking for a Chinese woman. Matches her description exactly. And here you are, hiding her in the dark like you got something to be ashamed of." "She's not hiding. She's walking. Now move." The man's hand drifted toward his gun. "Can't do that. Got a job to do. Garrett Hayes is paying good money to get his wife back, and I intend to collect." So it was Garrett's people. Cole felt something cold and familiar settle into his chest, the same feeling he got right before violence became inevitable. "She's not going back to him," Cole said quietly. "That's not your decision to make." "Yeah, it is." They stared at each other for 3 seconds that stretched like hours. Then the man drew. He was fast, faster than Cole expected. But Cole had been in more gunfights than this fool had seen sunsets, and fast only mattered if you could hit what you aimed at. Cole's gun cleared leather a half-second after the other man's, but his shot went center mass while the other man's went wide. The sound was deafening in the narrow street, echoing off walls and making Lian May scream. The man looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest with an expression of surprise, like he couldn't quite believe it had gone this way. Then he fell backward and didn't move again. "Run," Cole told Lian May. She ran. Cole followed, dragging her through a maze of alleys and side streets while shouts erupted behind them. The other 2 men would have heard the shot, would be coming. They had maybe 2 minutes before this whole thing turned into a manhunt. He pulled Lian May into a recessed doorway, pressed her against the wall, and put a finger to his lips. She nodded, breathing hard, eyes wide with terror. Footsteps pounded past their hiding spot. The tall man with the scarred eyebrow and the bull-built one running toward the sound of the gunshot. They passed within 5 feet and never looked their way. Cole waited until the footsteps faded, then led Lian May in the opposite direction. They moved fast, but not running, trying to look like people heading home after a late evening instead of fugitives fleeing a killing. The boarding house appeared out of the darkness like salvation. Cole got Lian May inside and up to his room without encountering anyone. He locked the door, checked the window, 2nd floor, harder to access but not impossible, and finally allowed himself to breathe. Lian May sank onto the bed, shaking. "You killed him." "Yeah, just like that, without hesitation." "He drew first." "I just finished it." Cole reloaded his gun, muscle memory, not even thinking about it. "You all right?" "No, I'm not all right. None of this is all right." Her voice rose on the edge of hysteria. "Men are dying because of me. You're killing people because of me. How is any of this all right?" Cole holstered his gun and crouched down in front of her so they were eye level. "Listen to me. Those men weren't innocent. They were hired thugs coming to drag you back to someone who tortured you. They knew what they were signing up for. And yeah, I killed one of them. I'll probably have to kill the other 2 before this is done. But that's not on you. That's on them for taking the job, and it's on Garrett for sending them. But no buts. You don't get to take responsibility for other people's evil. You didn't make Garrett abusive. You didn't make those men hunt you. All you did was try to survive, and there's no shame in that." Lian May's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I'm so tired of running." "I know. I want it to end. It will. I promise you, this will end. How? That was the question, wasn't it? Cole stood, paced to the window, looked out at the dark street below. How did this end? They could keep running, keep looking over their shoulders, waiting for the next group of hunters to find them. They could try to disappear, change names, start over somewhere Garrett would never think to look. Or, we go back, Cole said. Leon May stared at him. What? We go back to Red Hollow. We finish this properly, legal-like. Get a judge involved, file for divorce or annulment or whatever it takes. Make it official so Garrett can't claim you anymore. That's insane. He'll kill me the second I set foot in that town. Not if we do it right. Not if we bring law that actually works. Cole turned to face her. I still know people. Federal marshals who owe me favors. We get one of them involved. Make this a territorial matter instead of just a local dispute. Garrett won't be able to touch you with federal law watching. You really think that would work? I think it's better than running forever. Cole moved back to sit beside her. But it's your choice. Your life. I'm not going to make this decision for you. Leon May was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. The brand on her wrist was visible in the lamplight, those characters burned deep into flesh that would carry the scar forever. I don't want to be afraid anymore, she said finally. I don't want to wake up every morning wondering if today is the day they find me. I want, she took a shaking breath, I want to be free, really free. Not just running, but actually free. Then we do this the hard way. We go back, we face him with the law on our side, and we make sure he never comes after you again. When? After I get back from this freight run. That gives us a few days to plan, to reach out to the people I know. We do this smart and careful. Leon May nodded slowly. All right, we go back. Cole spent that night in a chair by the door, gun in his lap, listening to Leon May's restless sleep and the sounds of San Aurelio settling into darkness. He thought about all the ways this plan could go wrong, all the variables he couldn't control. But he'd meant what he'd said. Running forever wasn't living. It was just a slower kind of death. At dawn, he left Leon May with strict instructions to stay in the room, talk to no one, and barricade the door until he returned. He met the freight wagon at the office, and they rolled out with 3 other guards and enough supplies to keep a mining camp fed for a month. The trip up into the hills gave Cole time to think, to plan. He knew a federal marshal named Sullivan who worked out of the territorial capital. Good man, honest, someone who actually cared about justice instead of politics. If Cole could get word to him, explain the situation, Sullivan might be willing to intervene. The mining camp was exactly as miserable as Cole remembered. A collection of tents and shanties clinging to a hillside, men with desperate eyes digging for silver and finding mostly dirt. They unloaded the supplies, collected payment, and headed back down. On the return trip, they encountered the 2 remaining bounty hunters. They were waiting at a narrow spot in the road where rocks forced the wagon to slow. The tall man with the scarred eyebrow and the bull-built one, positioned on either side, rifles ready. Far enough, Scarface called out. We're looking for Cole Hart. The freight manager, sitting next to Cole on the driver's bench, went rigid. We're just hauling supplies. Don't want any trouble. Then give us Hart, and there won't be any. Cole sighed. He'd hoped to avoid this, but hope was a luxury he rarely indulged in. That'd be me. Scarface smiled without humor. Step down from the wagon. Why? Because Garrett Hayes is paying us to bring you back, dead or alive, your choice which. The other guards were looking at Cole now, calculating whether they wanted to get involved in whatever this was. Cole didn't blame them. This wasn't their fight. I got a better idea, Cole said. You boys turn around and ride back to Red Hollow. Tell Garrett that his wife isn't coming back and neither am I. Tell him to let it go while he still can. Can't do that? Got our reputation to consider. Your reputation, Cole laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your partner's dead in a San Aurelio alley. You really want to test whether I got lucky or whether I'm just better than you? The bull-built man shifted his rifle. 2 against 1. I like those odds. 2 against 4, one of the other guards said suddenly. He was young, maybe 20, with a face full of freckles and more courage than sense. I don't know what this is about, but I'm not letting you boys bushwhack a man I've been riding with. Me neither, another guard chimed in, an older man with gray in his beard. Scarface's smile faded. This isn't your concern. It is now. The young guard's hand moved to his rifle. So what's it going to be? You want to try your luck against four-armed men, or you want to ride away and keep breathing? For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Scarface lowered his rifle slightly. This ain't over, Hart. Yeah, it is. You just don't know it yet. Cole's hand rested on his gun. Tell Garrett I'm coming for him. Tell him to lawyer up and prepare to lose everything. And tell him if he sends any more men after Lee and May, I'll make what happened to your partner look gentle. The two bounty hunters backed their horses away from the wagon, keeping their rifles ready but not aimed. They watched as the freight wagon rolled past, and Cole watched them right back until they were out of sight around a bend. Thanks, Cole said to the guards who'd backed him. The young one shrugged. Seemed like the right thing to do. Still, I appreciate it. This woman they're talking about, the older guard said. She worth all this trouble? Cole thought about Lee and May in that street, bound and broken, and then about her standing in the saloon telling her truth to a room full of people who wanted her to stay silent. Yeah, he said, she is. They made it back to San Aurelio without further incident. Cole collected his pay, thanked the guards again, and headed straight for the boarding house. He took the stairs 3 at a time, knocked on the door, identified himself. The furniture scraped. The door opened. Lee and May looked at him with relief so profound it was almost painful to see. You came back, she said. Told you I would. I know, but She stopped, shook her head. They came looking for me. The 2 remaining men. The landlady told them she hadn't seen anyone matching my description, but they're still searching. I know. I ran into them on the road. Are they still alive? For now. Cole closed the door behind him. But we can't wait any longer. We need to move on this. I'm going to send word to a marshal I know, see if he can meet us in Red Hollow. We'll go back with federal authority, file the proper papers, make this legal. And if he can't come? If he won't help? Then we do it anyway. We go back and we force the issue. Because I'm done watching you live in fear, and I'm damn sure done with Garrett Hayes thinking he can buy his way out of consequences. Lee and May wrapped her arms around herself. I'm scared. Good. Means you're paying attention. Cole moved to the window, checked the street below. Fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being scared that you get careless. When do we leave? Soon as I hear back from Sullivan. Couple days, maybe less. He turned to look at her. You sure about this? Once we start, there's no backing out. We go all the way, whatever that takes. She met his eyes, and he saw steel beneath the fear. I'm sure. All right then. Cole nodded. We finish this. He spent the next day making arrangements, sending a telegram to Marshal Sullivan, buying supplies for the trip back, checking the streets for any sign of the remaining bounty hunters. The telegram came back that evening. Sullivan would meet them in Red Hollow in 3 days. He'd bring another marshal as backup and enough federal authority to make the local law step aside. Cole showed Lee and May the telegram, and he watched some of the tension leave her shoulders. It's really happening, she said. Yeah, it really is. What if we get there and it all falls apart? What if the judge won't grant the divorce? What if Garrett, then we make it fall apart in our favor? But we try the legal way first. We give the system a chance to work. And if it doesn't? Cole's jaw tightened. Then we do what needs doing. They left San Aurelio before dawn 2 days later, riding the same horses that had carried them south. The town was still sleeping, streets empty except for a few early risers heading to work. Cole kept his eyes moving, looking for threats, but saw none. The ride back to Red Hollow took 4 days instead of 5. They were following the road now, making better time, and neither of them was half dead with exhaustion anymore. Lee and May had gotten better at riding, more confident in the saddle, and Cole noticed other changes too. She sat straighter, spoke more. The constant fear that had haunted her eyes was still there, but it had company now. Anger, determination, something that looked almost like hope. On the 3rd day out, they camped by a creek that actually had water in it. Cole shot a turkey, and they had a feast by frontier standards. While they ate, Lee and May asked him about Emily. What was she like, your sister? Cole was quiet for a while, working on a drumstick. Stubborn, smart, had a laugh that could light up a whole room. She was younger than me by 5 years, and I always felt like I needed to protect her. But she didn't need protecting. She needed someone to believe her when she said something was wrong. Did you believe her? Not soon enough. The meat had gone tasteless in his mouth. She wrote me letters, telling me things weren't right with her husband. I thought she was exaggerating, thought marriage was just hard sometimes, and she needed to work through it. I gave her all the wrong advice, told her to be patient, to try harder, to remember her vows. You didn't know. I should have. I was a lawman. I was supposed to see these things. Cole threw the bone into the fire. After she died, I found all her letters in a box in my old room at our parents' house. 23 letters, each one getting more desperate, and I'd ignored every single one. That's when I stopped trusting the law to do the right thing, because I'd been the law and I'd failed completely. Lian May was quiet, then said, "You're trying to save me to make up for not saving her. Maybe? That bother you?" "No, I don't care why you're helping me. I'm just grateful that you are." They rode into Red Hollow on the afternoon of the fourth day with the sun beating down and dust devils spinning in the empty streets. The town looked exactly the same as when they'd left it. Same crooked buildings, same worn-out people, same air of quiet desperation. But something had changed. Cole could feel it as they rode down the main street. People stopped to stare, and instead of the contempt he'd expected, he saw something else. Uncertainty. Maybe even shame. They rode straight to the sheriff's office. Sullivan was already there, waiting on the porch with another marshal Cole didn't recognize. Sullivan was a big man, solid through the shoulders, with a face that had seen too much and somehow stayed kind anyway. "Hart," he said, standing. "Been a while." "Sullivan, thanks for coming." "Got your telegram. Figured I owed you one after Blackwater." Sullivan's eyes moved to Lian May. "This, the woman?" "This is Lian May. Lian May, this is Federal Marshal John Sullivan." Sullivan touched the brim of his hat. "Ma'am, I understand you've had some trouble." "That's one way to put it," Lian May said. The sheriff emerged from his office looking like he'd aged 10 years in the weeks they'd been gone. "Marshal Sullivan, Hart, Mrs. Hayes." "Don't call me that," Lian May said sharply. The sheriff flinched. "Right. Sorry. Miss Jang, then." "Where's Garrett?" Cole asked. "At his house, I expect. He's been quiet since you left." "Quiet how?" "Drinking, mostly. Making threats he doesn't follow through on. A couple of his ranch hands quit. He's not doing well." "Good," Lian May said, and Cole heard the satisfaction in her voice. Sullivan pulled out a document from his coat. "I've got a federal order here requiring Garrett Hayes to appear before a territorial judge in 2 days. The judge will hear testimony regarding allegations of abuse and determine the status of the marriage. If the allegations are substantiated, he'll grant an annulment on grounds of cruelty. And if they're not," Lian May asked, "then we file criminal charges and let a jury decide. Either way, you're not going back to him." Sullivan's voice was firm. "That's a promise." Cole felt something in his chest unclench slightly. This might actually work. They might actually pull this off without more violence, more blood. Then someone came running down the street. It was Dr. Peterson, the old man who'd spoken up in the saloon. He was out of breath, face red, pointing back the way he'd come. "Garrett," he gasped. "He's lost his mind. He's got a gun. He's at the saloon. He's saying if he can't have her, nobody can." Cole was moving before Peterson finished talking. He was running down the street with his gun already drawn, Sullivan and the other marshal right behind him. Lian May calling his name, but he couldn't stop, couldn't slow down because he knew exactly what Garrett was planning. The saloon doors were closed. Cole hit them with his shoulder, and they flew open. Garrett was standing in the middle of the room with a revolver in one hand and a bottle in the other. He was drunk, swaying, eyes wild. The same people who'd listened to Lian May tell her story were pressed against the walls, faces pale with fear. "There you are," Garrett slurred when he saw Cole. "Come to gloat? Come to see what you destroyed? Put the gun down, Garrett." "Why?" "What's the point? She's gone. My reputation's gone. My life is over. Because of you. Because of her. Your life is over because you're a violent drunk who tortured his wife. That's on you, not on us." Garrett laughed high and wild. "Wife? She was never really my wife, just some Chinese whore who thought she was too good for me. Well, she's not. She's nothing. And I'm going to make sure everyone remembers that." He raised the gun, and for a second Cole thought Garrett was going to shoot him, But then Garrett turned the barrel toward his own head, and Cole realized what was actually about to happen. "Don't," Cole said, but there was no conviction in it. "Tell her," Garrett said, tears streaming down his face now. "Tell her this is her fault. Tell her she killed me." "No," came Lian May's voice from behind Cole. She pushed past him into the saloon, stood there looking at her husband with an expression of complete contempt. Don't you dare try to make me responsible for your weakness." "Lian May," Cole started. "No." She walked toward Garrett, fearless, furious. "You want to die? Fine, die. But you don't get to blame me for it. You don't get to make me carry that. Everything that happened to you, you brought on yourself. Every consequence, every loss, every humiliation, that's yours, not mine." Garrett was sobbing now, the gun shaking in his hand. "I loved you." "You didn't love me. You loved owning me. There's a difference." Lian May stopped 10 feet away from him. "And now you don't own anything. Not me, not your reputation, not even your self-respect. So do whatever you're going to do, but do it knowing that I'm free and you'll never touch me again." The room held its breath. Then Garrett lowered the gun slowly, and Cole saw the exact moment when the fight went out of him. His shoulders slumped, his face crumpled. He looked like a man who'd realized he'd lost everything and had no idea how to get it back. "I should have been better to you," he whispered. "Yeah," Lian May said. "You should have." Sullivan stepped forward and gently took the gun from Garrett's hand. "Garrett Hayes, I'm placing you under federal custody pending a hearing on charges of assault, unlawful restraint, and attempted murder. You have the right to—" But Garrett wasn't listening. He was looking at Lian May with something that might have been regret if it wasn't so thoroughly mixed with self-pity. "I'm sorry," he said. Lian May turned away without answering. She walked out of the saloon into the afternoon sun, and Cole watched her go with something like pride swelling in his chest. He followed her outside and found her standing in the middle of the street, face tilted up toward the sky, breathing deep like she'd been underwater for months, and just now reached the surface. "You all right?" he asked. I stood up to him. I looked him in the eye, and I wasn't afraid. "No, you weren't. He's pathetic. All this time I thought he was this force of nature, this thing I couldn't fight. And he's just pathetic. Most bullies are, once you strip away the power they've stolen." Lian May turned to look at him, and there were tears on her face, but she was smiling. "It's over. It's really over." "Yeah," Cole said. "It really is." The hearing took place 2 days later in a building that served as both courthouse and town hall, a structure with warped floorboards and windows that didn't quite close right. Judge Thornton had ridden in from the territorial capital, a stern man in his 60s with white hair and eyes that had seen every kind of human ugliness and stopped being surprised by any of it. Cole sat in the back row while Lian May took the stand. She wore the same dress she'd bought in San Aurelio, simple and clean, her hair pulled back severe enough to show the fading bruises on her face. She'd refused to cover them with powder or paint. "Let them see," she'd said. "Let them all see what he did." The room was packed. Seemed like half of Red Hollow had turned out, some out of genuine concern, most out of morbid curiosity. Garrett sat at the defendant's table with a lawyer he'd scraped together from somewhere, looking diminished in his church clothes, hands folded like he was praying for mercy he didn't deserve. Judge Thornton adjusted his spectacles and looked at Lian May. "Mrs. Hayes." "Zhang," she interrupted. "My name is Lian May Zhang." "Miss Zhang, then. Do you understand why we're here today?" "Yes, sir. To determine whether my marriage should be annulled." "And you believe it should be?" "I know it should be. I never wanted to marry Garrett Hayes. I was forced into it to settle my father's debt. And from the first day of that marriage, he treated me not as a wife, but as property he had the right to destroy." Garrett's lawyer, a thin man with oiled hair, stood up. "Your Honor, this is highly emotional testimony, but it's also one-sided, and—" "Sit down, counselor," Judge Thornton said mildly. "I'll tell you when you can speak." The lawyer sat. "Continue, Miss Zhang." Lian May took a breath, and Cole watched her gather herself the same way he'd seen soldiers do before a battle. "On our wedding night, Garrett Hayes broke 2 of my ribs because I smiled at another man during the reception. Over the following 8 months, he broke my arm, fractured my cheekbone, burned me with cigarettes, and branded me with a hot iron." She held up her wrist, showing the room the characters seared into her flesh. "He starved me as punishment, locked me in the cellar without light for a week when I tried to leave the first time. He controlled every aspect of my life, what I wore, what I ate, who I could speak to. And when I finally managed to escape, he had me dragged back and was planning to whip me in the town square as a warning to other women. Do you have proof of these allegations? I have witnesses. Dr. Peterson treated my injuries. Mrs. Chen heard the violence through the walls of her house. Multiple people saw him drag me through the streets, and I have the scars. She touched her ribs, her face. My body is the proof. Judge Thornton made notes in a ledger. And Mr. Hart? What's his involvement in all this? Cole saved my life. He cut me free when no one else would. He helped me escape. He's the only person in Red Hollow who cared enough to intervene. The judge looked at Cole, assessing. That true, Mr. Hart? Cole stood. Yes, sir. I witnessed Garrett Hayes dragging Miss Jang through the street with her hands bound and bleeding. The sheriff was present and allowing it to happen. I made the decision to intervene. Former marshal, aren't you, from Blackwater? Yes, sir. I remember that incident. Messy business. Yes, sir, it was. And you're not looking to take advantage of this young woman's situation? Cole felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. No, sir. I'm looking to make sure she has a chance at a life that doesn't include being beaten half to death. Noble sentiment. The judge didn't sound convinced or skeptical, just tired. All right, sit down, please. For the next 3 hours, the courtroom heard testimony. Dr. Peterson described treating Leanne May's injuries and explained in clinical detail what kinds of force would be required to cause that level of damage. Mrs. Chen testified about the screaming she'd heard, the blood she'd seen, the fear in Leanne May's eyes whenever Garrett was near. The bartender from the saloon admitted that Garrett had bragged about keeping his woman in line on multiple occasions. Garrett's lawyer tried to argue that a man had the right to discipline his wife, that Chinese immigrants didn't understand proper American marriage customs, that Leanne May had been willful and disobedient. Each argument landed worse than the last, and Cole watched the judge's expression grow colder with every word. When it was Garrett's turn to testify, he took the stand looking like a man who knew he'd already lost, but was too stubborn to admit it. Mr. Hayes, the judge said, did you strike your wife? I disciplined her when she needed it. That's different from, did you or did you not strike her? Yes, but did you brand her with a hot iron? Garrett's face reddened. She needed to understand that she belonged to me, that running away wasn't, did you lock her in a cellar without light for a week? She'd tried to leave. I had to make sure she understood the consequences of, answer the question, Mr. Hayes, did you lock her in a cellar? Yes. Judge Thornton removed his spectacles and cleaned them with a handkerchief, taking his time. The silence stretched until it was almost unbearable. Mr. Hayes, the judge finally said, I've presided over a lot of cases in my career. Claim disputes, theft, murder, all manner of human wickedness. But I have to say, hearing you describe torture as discipline turns my stomach in ways that very little does anymore. Your Honor, I was trying to be a good husband. You were trying to break another human being. There's a difference. The judge replaced his spectacles. This marriage is annulled, effective immediately. Miss Jang is free to go. Mr. Hayes, you're being remanded to federal custody to face criminal charges. Marshal Sullivan will take you into his care until trial. Garrett stood up so fast his chair fell over. You can't do this. She's my wife. She's a free woman who you tortured for 8 months. And if you finish that sentence with the word property, I will hold you in contempt and add 30 days to whatever sentence you eventually receive. Sullivan moved forward with manacles. Garrett looked around the courtroom wildly, searching for support, for someone who would agree that this was wrong, unfair, an overreach of federal power. He found nothing but turned backs and averted eyes. This isn't justice, Garrett said as Sullivan locked the manacles around his wrists. No, Judge Thornton agreed. Justice would be letting Miss Jang do to you what you did to her. This is mercy. Be grateful for the distinction. They led Garrett out of the courtroom. He went quietly, all the fight finally gone out of him, leaving behind only a broken man who'd confused ownership with love and cruelty with strength. Leanne May sat very still in the witness chair, like she didn't quite believe it was over. Judge Thornton looked at her with something that might have been kindness. Miss Jang, You're free to go. The marriage is dissolved. You owe no debts to the Hayes estate, and you have the full protection of territorial law should anyone attempt to harass or harm you. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." Her voice came out small, disbelieving. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm just doing my job. Thank Mr. Hart for caring enough to make sure this got in front of someone who would actually do their job." The gavel came down, final and absolute. People filed out of the courtroom in small groups, talking in low voices. Some looked ashamed, others looked relieved. A few looked angry, though whether at Garrett or at the outcome, Cole couldn't tell and didn't much care. He waited while Lian May gathered herself, while she signed the papers the judge's clerk brought her, while she accepted quiet congratulations from Dr. Peterson and Mrs. Chen. Then he walked her outside into afternoon sunlight that felt cleaner somehow, brighter. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you decide what you want to do with the rest of your life." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Lian May looked down the street at Red Hollow, at the town that had watched her suffer and done nothing until it was forced to care. "I don't want to stay here. Can't say I blame you. Will you—" She stopped, started again. "Will you come with me? To San Aurelio? I know you don't owe me anything more, and I can make it on my own, but—" "Yeah," Cole said. "I'll come with you." They left Red Hollow the next morning with the sun barely up and the town still sleeping. Cole had collected his pay from the freight company, sold his boarding house room back to the landlady, and packed what little he owned. Lian May had even less, just the clothes on her back, the photograph of her parents, and a small bag of supplies Cole had bought for the journey. The ride back to San Aurelio felt different from the desperate flight they'd made weeks earlier. Slower. Calmer. Lian May rode with more confidence now, and when they stopped to rest or make camp, she talked more. About her parents, about growing up in San Francisco, about dreams she'd had before Garrett had turned her life into a nightmare. "I wanted to be a teacher," she told him one evening as they sat by a small fire. "Work with children, help them learn. My mother thought it was foolish, said Chinese women didn't get those kinds of jobs. But my father encouraged me, said America was different, that anything was possible if you worked hard enough. You could still do that. Teach, I mean. Maybe. If anyone would hire me, if they could look past—" She gestured vaguely at herself, at everything she represented. "Someone will. Might take time, but someone will." "You always this optimistic?" Cole laughed. "Not even close. But you asked what happens next, and the answer is whatever you make happen. That's the thing about freedom. It's terrifying because suddenly all the choices are yours." Lian May poked at the fire with a stick. "I don't know how to make choices. Garrett made all of them. Before that, my father did. I've never just decided what I wanted and done it." "Then start small. What do you want for breakfast tomorrow?" "What? Breakfast? What do you want to eat?" "I don't—" She stopped, considering. "Eggs. I want eggs. And coffee. Real coffee. Not the terrible stuff we've been making." "All right. Tomorrow we'll find a town and get you eggs and good coffee. That's choice number one." She smiled, tentative but real. "That's a stupid choice." "It's your choice. That's what makes it count." They reached San Aurelio 5 days later, and Cole guided them straight to Chen's restaurant, the Chinese place he'd told her about before. The woman who ran it, Mrs. Chen, no relation to the neighbor from Red Hollow, was a sturdy woman in her 50s who took one look at Lian May and seemed to understand everything without being told. "You need work?" she asked in English, then repeated the question in Cantonese. Lian May's eyes widened. She answered in Cantonese, rapid and emotional, and Mrs. Chen nodded along. They talked for several minutes while Cole stood there understanding nothing but the tone, which shifted from tentative to hopeful. Finally, Mrs. Chen switched back to English. "She can work here. Cooking, serving, whatever. I pay fair, give her a room upstairs until she finds better. You," she looked at Cole, "you staying? For a while. You hurt her, I kill you myself." "Understood. Good. Now sit. I feed you both. You look like you've been eating dirt for a week." The food that came out was better than anything Cole had tasted in months. Real rice, vegetables that hadn't been dried or canned, chicken cooked with spices he couldn't name but wanted more of. Lian May ate slowly, savoring every bite, and Cole watched something in her face relax that he hadn't seen relax before. After they ate, Mrs. Chen showed Lan Mei the room upstairs. It was small, barely bigger than a closet, with a narrow bed and a window that looked out over the street. But it was clean and private and hers, and when Lian Mei turned to look at Cole, there were tears in her eyes. "It's perfect," she said. "It's a start," Mrs. Chen corrected. "But starts are important." Cole helped Lian Mei settle in. Not that there was much to settle, given how little she owned. Then he stood awkwardly in the doorway while she arranged her few belongings with the care of someone who'd never had belongings to arrange before. "What about you?" she asked. "Where will you stay?" "I'll find somewhere. The boarding house probably still has rooms." "Cole." She turned to face him fully. "Thank you for everything, for saving me, for helping me, for believing me when no one else did." "You saved yourself. I just made sure you had the chance." "That's not true. Without you, I'd be dead or wishing I was. You gave me my life back." Cole shifted his weight, uncomfortable with gratitude he wasn't sure he deserved. "What are you going to do now? Long term, I mean. Work here for a while. Save money. Learn how to be a person again instead of a victim." She touched the brand on her wrist, unconscious habit. "Maybe get this removed somehow, if that's possible. Start over completely." "Sounds like a good plan. What about you?" "Haven't thought that far ahead." "You could stay in San Aurelio, find work here, maybe." But even as he said it, Cole knew he wouldn't. Staying meant getting attached, and getting attached meant more chances to fail people, more opportunities to prove that he was better at leaving than protecting. "We'll see." He left her there in her small room with its narrow bed and single window, and he tried not to think about how final it felt. The boarding house did have rooms, and Cole took one for a week while he figured out what came next. He found work again with the freight company. They liked having someone reliable who could handle trouble, and fell into a routine of sorts. Wake up, work, come back, sleep, repeat. It wasn't much of a life, but it was familiar. He saw Lian Mei around town sometimes. She'd wave when she spotted him, and he'd wave back, but they didn't talk much. She was busy with the restaurant, learning the work, finding her footing, and Cole was busy staying out of everyone's way. A month passed like that. Then two. One evening, Cole was eating alone at a cantina when Mrs. Chen sat down across from him without asking. "You're being stupid," she announced. Cole looked up from his plate. "Excuse me?" "Stupid. Dense. Thick in the head. Whatever word you like, that's what you are. I don't... That girl asks about you every day. Have you seen Cole? Is he all right? Does he need anything? And every day I tell her you're fine, and every day she looks disappointed. I'm giving her space. She needs to build a life without depending on me." Mrs. Chen snorted. "She's not depending on you. She's trying to thank you properly, but you keep running away like a coward." "I'm not running." "No? Then why haven't you been to the restaurant in 6 weeks?" Cole didn't have a good answer for that. "I know your type," Mrs. Chen continued. "Men who think they don't deserve good things, who push away anyone who gets close because they're so busy punishing themselves for past mistakes that they can't see what's right in front of them. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. I know you saved that girl when everyone else turned away. I know you killed for her, bled for her, risked everything to make sure she got justice. And now that she's safe, you're avoiding her because you don't know how to accept that maybe, just maybe, you did something right." Cole pushed his plate away, appetite gone. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to stop being an idiot. Come to dinner tomorrow. Actually talk to her. Stop treating your own life like it's something that happens to other people." "And if I don't?" Mrs. Chen stood up. "Then you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what if, and she'll spend the rest of hers thinking you left because she wasn't worth staying for. Your choice." She walked out, leaving Cole alone with his cooling food and the uncomfortable realization that she was right. He went to the restaurant the next evening. Lian Mei was behind the counter when he walked in, and her face lit up in a way that made his chest ache. "Cole, I was starting to think you'd left town." "No, just been working a lot." "Sit. I'll bring you food." He sat at a corner table, and she brought him tea first, then soup, then rice with vegetables and pork cooked in a sauce that tasted like home, even though he'd never had it before. She sat down across from him while he ate, and they fell into conversation more easily than he'd expected. She told him about the restaurant, about the regulars who came in, about learning to cook dishes she'd only eaten as a child. He told her about the freight runs, about the mountains and the mining camps, about nothing much at all. "You look better," he said finally. "I feel better. I sleep through the night now. Most nights, anyway. The nightmares are getting less frequent. That's good. Mrs. Chen says I'm a fast learner. She's teaching me the business side too. How to manage inventory, deal with suppliers, all of it. She says maybe in a year or two I could run my own place." "You'd be good at that." "You think so?" "Yeah, you're smart, you work hard, and you've survived things that would have broken most people. Running a restaurant would be easy by comparison." Lian Mei smiled. "I like the way you see me. Like I'm capable instead of broken." "You are capable, and you were never broken. Just bent by circumstances you couldn't control." "Like bamboo and wind," she said softly. "What?" "Something my mother used to say, that strong things bend instead of breaking." They talked until the restaurant closed and Cole helped her clean up. It felt natural, comfortable, like something they'd done 100 times before. When they finished, Lian Mei walked him to the door. "Will you come back?" she asked. "Or is this another 6-week goodbye?" "I'll come back. Promise?" "Yeah, I promise." And he did. He started eating at Chen several times a week, helping Lian Mei close up when his schedule allowed. They fell into an easy friendship, and Cole found himself looking forward to those evenings more than he wanted to admit. 3 months after the trial, Marshal Sullivan came through San Aurelio and stopped by the restaurant. He found Cole and Lian Mei eating together at the corner table. "Thought I'd give you an update," Sullivan said, pulling up a chair. "Garrett Hayes was convicted on all charges. Judge gave him 15 years hard labor." Lian Mei set down her chopsticks. 15 years. Could have been worse, could have been better, but he won't be bothering you again, that's for sure. "Good," she said, and meant it. "There's more. Hayes's estate is being liquidated to pay his debts. Turns out your father's debt was the least of his problems. He owed money all over creation. But the judge ruled that since the marriage was annulled on grounds of cruelty, you're not responsible for any of it. You walk away clean. I never wanted his money. I know. But you should know you're free of it all, completely free." After Sullivan left, Lian Mei sat very still, processing. Cole waited, giving her space. 15 years, she finally said. He'll be an old man when he gets out. If he gets out, hard labor isn't kind to men like Garrett. I should feel happy about that, vindicated. But mostly I just feel empty. Like I spent so much energy hating him and fearing him that now there's nothing left. That'll pass. The emptiness is just space where the fear used to live. Eventually something better will grow there. Like what? I don't know. Peace, maybe. Hope. Whatever you want to plant. Lian Mei looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. And you? What are you planting? Cole didn't have an answer for that. Winter came to San Aurelio, mild by frontier standards, but cold enough to make the desert nights bitter. Cole's freight work slowed down as the mountain passes became treacherous, and he found himself with more time than he knew what to do with. He spent most of it at the restaurant. Mrs. Chen had started giving him odd jobs to do, fixing the squeaky door, replacing warped floorboards, hauling supplies from the warehouse. He suspected she was making up half the work just to keep him around, but he didn't mind. It felt good to be useful in ways that didn't involve violence. One evening, about 5 months after they'd arrived in San Aurelio, Lian Mei asked him to walk with her. They ended up at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to empty desert, sitting on a low wall and watching the sun set in shades of orange and purple. Mrs. Chen asked me to be her partner, Lian Mei said. Not just an employee, an actual partner in the business. That's incredible. What'd you say? I said yes. She's teaching me everything. The recipes, the suppliers, the finances. In a few years, when she's ready to retire, I'll take over completely. You're going to own a restaurant. I'm going to own a restaurant, she repeated, like she couldn't quite believe it herself. Me, the girl who couldn't even choose what to eat for breakfast 6 months ago. You've come a long way. We've come a long way. She looked at him. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Sure you could. You just needed someone to give you a chance. No, I needed someone to care when no one else did. Someone to fight when I couldn't fight for myself. Someone to believe me. Her voice softened. I needed you. Cole felt something shift in his chest, something he'd been trying to ignore for months. Leon May, you're going to leave, aren't you? The question hit him like a punch. What? You're going to leave San Aurelio. I can see it. You get this look sometimes, like you're already halfway gone. He wanted to deny it, but she was right. Part of him was always halfway gone, always looking for the exit, always ready to run before he could fail someone else. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know how to stay. What do you mean? I mean, everywhere I've ever stayed, I've either failed people or they've failed me. My sister died while I was off playing lawman. My career ended in disaster. Every time I try to build something, it falls apart. So I've learned to leave before the falling apart happens. It's easier that way. Easier for who? For everyone. Lianmei was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Do you know what the worst part of being with Garrett was? It wasn't the violence. It wasn't even the fear. It was the isolation, knowing that I was suffering and no one cared enough to help, feeling like I didn't matter enough for anyone to fight for. You matter. I know that now, because you showed me. You fought for me when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose, and now you're talking about leaving because you're afraid of failing me. But Cole, her voice cracked. The only way you could fail me is by giving up on yourself. Cole looked at her, really looked, and saw a woman who'd survived hell and come out stronger, who'd faced down her abuser and won, who was building a life with her own hands and refusing to apologize for taking up space in the world. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. That's not your decision to make. I get to decide what I deserve, remember? Freedom means making my own choices. And what do you choose? She took his hand, tentative, giving him every chance to pull away. He didn't. I choose to ask you to stay. Not because I need you, but because I want you. There's a difference. Cole thought about all the times he'd run, all the places he'd left behind, all the people he'd convinced himself were better off without him. He thought about Emily and Blackwater and every failure that haunted his sleep. And then he thought about Lan Mei in that street, bound and broken, and how he'd cut her free, how she'd stood in that saloon and told her truth, how she'd faced Garrett one last time and won. Maybe redemption wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about building something better with whatever pieces were left. All right, Tulm, he said. I'll stay. You mean it? Yeah, I mean it. Lianmei smiled, wide and genuine, and Cole felt something in him unclench that he hadn't realized was tight. They sat there on that wall as the sun finished setting and the stars came out, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Cole Hart felt like he might actually be home. Staying turned out to be harder than leaving ever was. Cole moved out of the boarding house a week after that conversation on the wall and took a room above a stable on the south side of town. It was cheap, smelled like horses, and had a window that looked out onto an alley where stray dogs fought over scraps. But it was his, paid for with money he earned doing honest work. And that mattered more than comfort. The freight company kept him busy through the winter. He made runs to the mining camps when the weather allowed, guarded shipments of silver coming down from the hills, and once rode along with a payroll delivery that went sideways when 3 idiots tried to rob them. Cole put 2 in the dirt and sent the 3rd running with a bullet in his leg. The freight manager gave him a bonus and stopped asking if he planned to stick around. Between runs, he worked at the restaurant. Mrs. Chen had stopped pretending the jobs were necessary and just started paying him outright to help with the heavy lifting and occasional troublemakers who didn't understand that no meant no. It wasn't much money, but combined with the freight work, it was enough to live on. More importantly, it meant he saw Lian Mei almost every day. They didn't talk about what was happening between them, didn't put names to it or make promises neither of them was sure they could keep. They just existed in each other's orbit, growing closer in increments so small they were barely noticeable until suddenly they were. Cole started teaching Lian Mei to shoot on Sunday afternoons when the restaurant was closed. They'd ride out into the desert with an old rifle he'd bought cheap and set up bottles on rocks. She was terrible at first, flinching every time she pulled the trigger, sending shots wild into the dirt. Breathe, Cole told her. Squeeze, don't pull. Let the gun surprise you. It keeps kicking. It's supposed to kick. That's what happens when you set off an explosion 6 inches from your face. He moved behind her, adjusted her stance, showed her how to brace against the recoil. Try again. She fired. The bottle exploded, and Lian May's face lit up with surprised joy. I hit it. Yeah, you did. Can I try again? They went through 2 boxes of ammunition that afternoon, and Lian May hit more targets than she missed by the end. On the ride back to town, she was quiet in a thoughtful way. Why did you want to teach me this? She asked. Because knowing how to defend yourself means never having to rely on someone else doing it for you. You think I'll need to defend myself? I think the world's a dangerous place, and being prepared doesn't hurt. He glanced at her. Besides, you should know what it feels like to have power. Real power, not the kind someone gives you that they can take away. The kind you build yourself. Lian May absorbed that in silence. Then, thank you for understanding that. Spring came to San Aurelio with wildflowers blooming in impossible places and temperatures that made you remember why people settled here despite the hardship. The restaurant's business picked up as travelers started moving through again, and Mrs. Chen began talking seriously about expansion. We could take over the space next door, she said one evening, spreading papers across a table. Double our seating, maybe add a bakery, sell bread and pastries in the mornings. Lian May studied the numbers with the focused intensity Cole had learned meant she was calculating 10 steps ahead. We'd need to hire more staff, at least 3 people, maybe 4. Can afford it if the projections hold. And if they don't? Then we scale back, but we won't know unless we try. Lian May looked at Cole, who was pretending to read a newspaper in the corner. What do you think? I think it's your decision, he said without looking up. I'm asking your opinion. He set the paper down. I think you're smart enough to know if it's a good risk or a bad one, and I think you've earned the right to take risks that are yours to take. Mrs. Chen snorted. Diplomatic. Annoying, but diplomatic. They expanded. It took 3 months of construction, hiring, and the kind of chaos that comes with trying to build something new while keeping the existing thing running. Cole helped where he could, moving equipment, dealing with contractors who thought they could overcharge 2 women, standing in the background looking threatening when necessary. The bakery opened on a Saturday morning in June, and the line stretched down the block. Lian May had spent a week perfecting recipes that blended Chinese techniques with frontier practicality, and the result was bread that people would cross town to buy. By noon, they'd sold out of everything, and Mrs. Chen was already talking about buying more ovens. That night, after they'd cleaned up and counted the money, Lian May and Cole sat on the back steps of the restaurant sharing a bottle of wine Mrs. Chen had produced from somewhere. We did it, Lian May said, staring at the stars. We actually did it. You did it. I just carried heavy things. Don't do that. Don't minimize your part. She took a drink, passed him the bottle. You know what I realized today? When we opened and all those people came, and I was so nervous I could barely breathe? What? That a year ago I was chained up in a street being treated like garbage, and today I opened a business. Today I fed people and made them happy and earned money with my own hands. Her voice caught. Today I was free in a way I'd never even imagined was possible. Cole didn't know what to say to that, so he just passed the bottle back and let her have the moment. You know what else I realized? She continued. What? That I'm falling in love with you, and it terrifies me. The words hung in the air between them, too big to take back, too honest to ignore. Cole's first instinct was to run, to make an excuse, find distance, protect them both from the inevitable disappointment. But he'd promised to stay, and staying meant being honest even when it was hard. That terrifies me too, he said. Because you don't feel the same way? Because I do feel the same way, and I don't know how to do this without breaking it. Lian May turned to look at him, and in the dim light spilling from the restaurant windows, she looked exactly like what she was. A woman who'd survived hell and decided to build heaven anyway. Then we learn together, she said. We make mistakes and fix them. We hurt each other sometimes and forgive each other after. We do what everyone does when they're trying to build something real. I'm not good at real. I'm better at temporary. Then get better at real. I did. I learned how to be a person again after Garrett tried to erase me. You can learn how to stay after spending so long leaving. Cole looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who understood exactly what she was asking, who knew his damage and wanted him anyway, who was offering him something he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve. All right, he said, we try. You mean it? Yeah, I mean it. She kissed him then, tentative and careful, giving him every chance to pull away. He didn't. He kissed her back, and it felt like a promise and a risk and a beginning all at once. Summer burned through San Aurelio with temperatures that made work miserable and nights that stayed warm long after the sunset. Cole's freight runs became exercises in endurance, moving goods in the early morning and late evening to avoid the worst heat. But the money was good, and he was saving more than he spent, building toward something he couldn't quite name yet, but could feel taking shape. Mrs. Chen started leaving the restaurant in Lian Mei's hands more often, testing her, preparing her for the day when she'd run everything herself. Lian Mei rose to it the way she rose to everything, with fierce determination and a refusal to accept that anything was impossible. She hired 2 new cooks and a young woman named Maria to help with the bakery. She negotiated better prices with suppliers by being smarter and more persistent than men who'd been in business for decades. She handled drunk customers with a combination of firmness and grace that left them apologizing without quite knowing why. And slowly, so slowly that Cole almost didn't notice it happening, she stopped flinching when he moved too quickly. Stopped checking exits every time she entered a room. Stopped touching the brand on her wrist like it was a reminder she needed to stay vigilant. The nightmares still came sometimes. Cole would wake in the middle of the night to her moving restlessly beside him. They'd started sharing his room above the stable on nights when the restaurant closed early, and he'd learned to wake her gently, to give her space to remember where she was and who she was with. "I'm sorry," she'd say every time. "Don't be. It's not your fault. I hate that he's still in my head, that he still has any power over me. Healing isn't linear. Some days are better than others. That's normal." She'd curl into him then, and he'd hold her until she fell back asleep, and he'd lie awake wondering how someone so strong could think she was weak. In August, word came that Garrett Hayes had died in prison, stabbed by another inmate during a dispute over something trivial. The letter from Marshal Sullivan was brief and factual, ending with a line that said, "Thought you'd want to know. This closes the last of it." Cole took the letter to the restaurant and found Lian Mei in the kitchen, working on a new recipe. He waited until she finished what she was doing, then handed it to her. She read it twice, expression unreadable. Then she folded it carefully and set it aside. "I should feel something," she said. "Relief, maybe. Or satisfaction, something." "What do you feel?" "Nothing. He's just gone. Like he never mattered at all." She washed her hands, dried them on her apron. "Is that wrong?" "No, it's just true. He spent so much energy trying to make you small, and in the end, he was the one who disappeared while you kept growing." "I won't have to look over my shoulder anymore." "No, you won't. And that should feel bigger than it does." Cole understood what she meant. Sometimes the end of something terrible was just the absence of terror, not the presence of joy. That came later in pieces, when you least expected it. That night they went back to the wall at the edge of town where they'd sat months earlier, and they watched the sunset in comfortable silence. Lian Mei leaned against Cole's shoulder, and he put his arm around her, and they didn't talk about Garrett or the past or anything except the way the sky turned purple at the edges. Fall brought cooler weather and the first real rain San Aurelio had seen in months. The desert bloomed in response, turning green in patches, and the town felt renewed somehow. Clean. Mrs. Chen announced she was retiring. "Not leaving," she clarified when Lian Mei panicked. "Just stepping back. The restaurant is yours now, officially. I'll still help when you need it, but the decisions are yours to make." "I don't know if I'm ready." "Nobody's ever ready. You just do it anyway and figure it out as you go." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Besides, you've been running this place for months. I just made it official." The paperwork was signed on a Wednesday afternoon with a lawyer present and everything proper and legal. Lian Mei Zhang became the sole owner of Chen's restaurant and bakery, and when she walked out of that office, she looked dazed. "I own a business," she said to Cole, who'd come along for moral support. "Yeah, you do." "A year and a half ago, I owned nothing, not even myself. And now you're building an empire." She laughed at that, bright and genuine. "An empire? That's ambitious." "You're ambitious. Might as well admit it." They celebrated that night with a dinner at the restaurant, just Lian Mei, Cole, Mrs. Chen, and the staff who'd become something like family. Someone brought out whiskey, and they toasted to new beginnings and hard work and the kind of success that you built with your own hands. Later, when everyone had gone home and it was just Cole and Leah and May cleaning up, she said, "I want to do something about the brand." Cole paused in the middle of wiping down a table. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm tired of carrying Garrett's mark on my skin. I want it gone." "It's a scar. I don't know if—" "There's a doctor in Santa Fe who does skin grafts. Takes skin from one part of your body and uses it to cover scars in another. It's new, experimental, but it works." She touched her wrist. "I've been saving money. I can afford it." "When would you go?" "Next month, maybe." "Would you come with me?" "Yeah, of course." The trip to Santa Fe took a week each way, and the procedure itself was quick but painful. The doctor was a serious man who asked no questions about how she'd gotten the brand, just explained what he'd do and what to expect during recovery. Cole waited outside the surgery room, pacing, remembering every time he'd failed to protect someone. When the doctor finally emerged and said it had gone well, Cole felt something release in his chest that he hadn't known was tight. Leah May was groggy from the laudanum they'd given her, but she smiled when she saw him. "Did he do it?" "Yeah, he did it." "Can I see?" "Not yet. It's all bandaged, but he said it should heal clean. Said in a few months you won't even be able to tell there was anything there." She closed her eyes, tears leaking out the corners. "Thank you for being here. Nowhere else I'd be." They stayed in Santa Fe for 2 weeks while the graft healed, staying in a modest hotel and exploring the city when Leon May felt up to it. It was different from San Aurelio, older, more established, with actual culture and theaters and restaurants that served food from around the world. One evening they attended an opera, neither of them understanding Italian but both captivated by the spectacle. Afterward, walking back to the hotel, Leon May said, "I never thought I'd have this." "What? Opera?" "This. Any of this. A business, freedom, someone who loves me without trying to own me." She stopped walking, turned to face him. "I never thought I'd get to just live. And now I am. And sometimes I can't believe it's real." "It's real." "How do you know?" "Because real things are messy and complicated and hard. If this was a dream, it would be easier." She laughed. "That's a terrible measure of reality." "It's the only one I've got." They returned to San Aurelio in November, and the restaurant had managed fine without them, thanks to Maria and the rest of the staff. Leon May threw herself back into work with renewed energy, expanding the menu, trying new things, building on what was already working. Cole noticed she touched her wrist less often now. The bandages had come off to reveal new skin, slightly different in color but smooth and unmarked. The characters Garrett had burned into her flesh were gone, replaced by something that was hers alone. Winter came again, the second one since they'd arrived in San Aurelio. Cole's room above the stable had become their room, filled with both their belongings, the space rearranged to accommodate 2 lives instead of 1. It wasn't much, still smelled like horses, still looked out on an alley, but it was theirs. On Christmas morning, Cole woke before dawn and lay there listening to Leah May breathe. She was curled on her side facing him, hair spread across the pillow, face peaceful in sleep. He thought about the woman he'd cut free in that street, broken and terrified, and the woman sleeping beside him now, strong and whole. They were the same person, but also completely different. She woke to find him watching her and smiled. "Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. I got you something. You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to." She reached under the bed and pulled out a package wrapped in brown paper. "Open it." Inside was a new shirt, dark blue with careful stitching, clearly made by hand. Cole ran his fingers over the seams, the even hems, the mother-of-pearl buttons. "You made this?" "Mrs. Chen taught me. Took me 3 tries to get it right, but I think it fits." He tried it on, and it fit perfectly. "It's beautiful. Thank you. Now you have something nice to wear that isn't covered in trail dust or bullet holes." Cole pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "I got you something too. It's not much." He handed her a small box. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple and elegant, with a clasp that worked easy. She held it up to the light, and it caught the dawn coming through the window. "For your wrist," Cole said. "To cover what was there, or not cover it, however you want to wear it." Leon May put it on, and it fit like it was made for her. She turned her wrist back and forth, watching the silver catch the light, and Cole saw her make peace with something in that moment. Not forgetting, she'd never forget, but deciding that the past didn't get to define the present anymore. "It's perfect," she said. "Thank you." They spent Christmas at the restaurant feeding people who had nowhere else to go. It was Leah and May's idea, offering free meals to anyone who needed them. And the turnout surprised them both. Drifters and widows, families struggling through hard times, people who'd been forgotten by a town that was supposed to care for its own. Cole helped serve while Leah and May cooked, and he watched her move through the room with grace and confidence, making everyone feel welcome. She'd transformed completely from the woman who'd been afraid to make eye contact, and he felt something like pride watching her. That night, exhausted and satisfied, they sat in the empty restaurant with the lamps turned low. "Thank you for today," Leah and May said. "You're the one who did all the cooking." "No, I mean, thank you for building this life with me, for staying when you could have left, for seeing me as more than what was done to me." Cole reached across the table, took her hand. "You made it easy." "That's not true. I was difficult. I was broken and angry and scared. You were surviving. There's a difference. But you could have walked away after the trial. After you knew I was safe. You didn't have to stay." "Yeah, I did. Because somewhere between cutting you free and watching you take your life back, I realized I'd been looking for something to believe in. And I found it in you." Leah and May's eyes filled with tears. "I love you. I love you too." They sat there in the quiet, holding hands across a table in an empty restaurant, and Cole thought about all the ways life could break you, and all the ways you could put yourself back together if you found the right person to help hold the pieces. Spring came again, marking 2 years since Cole had first ridden into Red Hollow. The anniversary passed without comment. Neither of them wanted to celebrate that particular memory. But Cole thought about it anyway, thought about the chain of choices that had led him to that street at that exact moment when Leanne May needed someone to intervene. If he'd been an hour earlier or later, if he'd gone straight to the saloon instead of pausing, if he'd decided it wasn't his business and kept walking, everything would be different. Leanne May might be dead, and Cole would still be drifting, running from his failures, convinced he didn't deserve anything good. Instead, they were here, building something that mattered. In April, Leanne May told him she was pregnant. They were in the kitchen, early morning before the restaurant opened, and she just said it plain, "I'm pregnant." Cole's mind went blank. Then it raced. Then it settled on something that felt like joy mixed with terror. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. About 6 weeks, I think." "How do you feel about it?" Terrified, excited, completely unprepared. She looked at him. "How do you feel about it?" Cole thought about his sister, about all the children he'd failed to protect over the years, about every way this could go wrong. Then he thought about Leanne May teaching a child to be strong and fearless, raising someone who'd never know what it meant to be powerless. "I feel the same way," he said, "but I think we can do this." "You really think so?" "Yeah, I really do." The pregnancy was hard. Leanne May was sick for months, barely able to keep food down, exhausted all the time. But she kept working, kept running the restaurant, kept refusing to let her body's rebellion slow her down. Cole worried constantly, worried she was pushing too hard, worried something would go wrong, worried he'd somehow fail her and the child both. But Leanne May seemed to take it in stride, adapting to each new challenge with the same determination she brought to everything. "You need to stop hovering," she told him one evening when he'd tried to carry groceries she was perfectly capable of carrying herself. "I'm not hovering. You're hovering. I'm pregnant, not dying. I know that." "Then trust me to know my own limits." He tried. It wasn't easy. Their daughter was born in December, during a cold snap that froze the water troughs and made everyone miserable. The labor was long and difficult, and Cole spent most of it terrified that something would go wrong. But when the midwife finally placed a tiny, screaming infant in Leanne May's arms, and Cole saw them both alive and whole, he felt something crack open in his chest that had been closed for years. "She's perfect," Leanne May said, exhausted and radiant. "Yeah, she is. What should we name her?" They'd talked about names for months but never settled on one. Now looking at this small person who existed because they'd both survived long enough to create her, Cole said, "Emily." if that's all right with you. Leon May looked at him with understanding. Your sister. Yeah. Emily Jang Hart. She tested it. I like it. They brought Emily home to the room above the stable, which they'd cleaned and reorganized to make space for a cradle Cole had built with his own hands. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid and safe, and watching his daughter sleep in something he'd made felt like a small redemption. Mrs. Chen came by with soup and advice, most of which they ignored but appreciated anyway. Maria brought blankets and offered to help at the restaurant so Leon May could take time to recover. The whole community showed up in small ways, reminding Cole that they'd built more than just a business here. They'd built a life that other people were invested in. The first months were chaos. Emily didn't sleep, which meant neither did they. She cried for reasons they couldn't understand and stopped crying for no reason at all. Leanne May fed her and changed her and walked her around the room at 3 a.m, while Cole tried to help in ways that mostly just got in the way. But slowly they figured it out. Learned Emily's rhythms, her preferences, the difference between hungry crying and tired crying and I just want attention crying. And Cole discovered something he'd never expected. He was good at this. Good at being patient, at staying calm when Leanne May was frazzled, at finding solutions to problems that seemed impossible. One night, walking Emily around the room while Leanne May slept, Cole caught his reflection in the window. He looked tired, rumpled, completely different from the hard-edged drifter who'd ridden into Red Hollow 2 years earlier, and he realized he liked this version better. Emily grew, started smiling, then laughing, then reaching for things with chubby hands that couldn't quite coordinate yet. She had Leanne May's dark hair and Cole's gray eyes, and watching her discover the world was like seeing it new himself. When she was 6 months old, Cole and Leanne May got married. Nothing fancy, just a simple ceremony at the courthouse with Mrs. Chen and Maria as witnesses. Leanne May wore a dress she'd made herself, pale green with white flowers embroidered at the hem. Cole wore the blue shirt she'd given him for Christmas. The judge who performed the ceremony was the same one who'd annulled her first marriage, and he looked pleased to be presiding over something that started with joy instead of ending pain. "Do you take this woman?" he began, and Cole said yes before the judge even finished the question. Afterward, they had dinner at the restaurant with everyone who mattered, and it was loud and chaotic and exactly right. Emily slept through most of it in Mrs. Chen's arms, oblivious to the fact that her parents had just made promises to build a future together. That night, lying in bed with Leanne May curled against his side, Cole said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a reason to stay. For showing me what it looks like to build something instead of running from everything." "I think we did that together." "Maybe. But you started it. That day in the saloon when you told everyone the truth. You taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway." Leanne May was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you ever think about that day? About what would have happened if you hadn't been there?" "Sometimes. But then I remind myself that I was there. That's what matters." "I was so scared. I thought I was going to die in that street." "But you didn't. You survived. And then you did more than survive. You built a life that's bigger and better than anything Garrett tried to take from you." "We built a life on..." "Yeah, we did." Time passed the way it does when you're actually living instead of just enduring. Emily grew into a toddler, then a child, curious and fearless and quick to laugh. The restaurant expanded again, taking over another space, hiring more staff. Leanne May became known throughout the territory for her cooking, and people traveled days just to eat at her establishment. Cole stopped doing freight runs when Emily was 2. The work was too dangerous, kept him away too long, and he discovered he liked being present more than he liked the money. Instead, he took a job as a deputy sheriff. Turned out San Aurelio's sheriff remembered him from his marshal days and thought he'd be an asset. It was strange wearing a badge again after so long. Strange enforcing laws he'd lost faith in. But this sheriff was honest, and the town needed someone who understood the difference between law and justice. So Cole pinned on the star and tried to be the kind of lawman he should have been before Blackwater broke him. He was good at it. Better than he'd expected. He settled disputes fairly, stood up to bullies, and made sure people who couldn't protect themselves had someone willing to do it for them. It felt like redemption, small and incremental, one good decision at a time. When Emily was 4, Leanne May decided to remove the last trace of her past. The house Garrett had owned in Red Hollow, still standing, still legally his even after his death, had been in probate limbo for years. Leon May filed paperwork claiming it as restitution for the abuse she'd suffered, and after a long legal battle, a judge agreed. She sold it immediately, didn't even visit first, and used the money to start a fund for women escaping abusive situations. She called it the Emily Hart Foundation, and it provided temporary housing, legal assistance, and job training for anyone who needed it. The first woman they helped was 19, beaten by her father, nowhere to go. They gave her a room, taught her to cook, helped her find work. 6 months later, she was standing on her own, and she cried when she thanked them. "This is what it's for," Leon May told Cole that night. "Everything we went through, everything we survived, it's so we can help other people survive too." The foundation grew. Word spread. Women started showing up from surrounding territories, desperate and scared, looking for help. Leon May took them all in, gave them work if they wanted it, space if they didn't, and never asked for anything in return except that they pay it forward when they could. Cole watched her transform pain into purpose, and he understood that this was healing looked like. Not forgetting what happened, but making sure it meant something. Emily started school at 6, bright and eager, asking questions about everything. She knew her mother's story in age-appropriate terms, knew that Mama had been hurt by bad people, and that Papa had helped her get away. She understood that the foundation existed because sometimes people needed help, and it was important to be the kind of person who helped. "Will I run the restaurant when I grow up?" she asked Leon May one evening. "If you want to, or you can do something completely different. Your life is yours to build however you want." "What if I want to be a deputy like Papa?" "Then you be a deputy. As long as you're happy and you're helping people, that's what matters." Cole listened to this from across the room, mending a shirt that Emily had torn climbing trees, and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for 40 years. This was it. This was what life looked like when you stopped running from it. The years accumulated. Emily grew into a teenager, all sharp wit and fierce opinions, more like her mother than she probably realized. The restaurant thrived. The foundation helped hundreds of women build new lives. Cole's work as a deputy earned him respect throughout the territory, and when the sheriff retired, they offered Cole the job. He turned it down. Leadership had never suited him, and he preferred working on the ground level where he could actually make a difference. They promoted a younger man instead, someone with energy and idealism, and Cole stayed on as his deputy, offering wisdom when asked and staying out of the way when not. Leon May turned 40 and celebrated by taking a month off to travel with Cole and Emily to San Francisco, visiting the neighborhood where she'd grown up. They found the building where her parents' store had been. It was something else now, a butcher shop. But standing there, Leon May told Emily stories about her grandparents, about their dreams and their struggles. "They wanted me to have opportunities they never had," she said. "And I do. I have this life, this family, this freedom. I think they'd be proud." "I think they'd be amazed," Cole said. On the trip back to San Aurelio, as they rode through desert that was simultaneously harsh and beautiful, Emily asked, "Papa, do you ever wish you'd done things differently, made different choices?" Cole thought about that. Thought about all the mistakes and failures, all the times he'd been too late or too weak or too compromised. Thought about Emily in Blackwater and the disaster that had ended his career. "Yeah," he said honestly, "I wish I'd been braver sooner. Wish I'd stood up to injustice before it cost lives. Wish I'd understood that doing the right thing matters more than following orders. But if you'd done everything differently, you wouldn't have been in Red Hollow when Mama needed you." That's true. So maybe the mistakes were part of the path to getting here. Cole looked at his daughter, so young and already so wise, and smiled. Maybe they were. They arrived home to find the restaurant bustling, the foundation helping 3 new women, and a town that felt like theirs in a way that mattered. Cole unsaddled the horses while Leon May and Emily went inside, and he stood in the stable breathing in the smell of hay and leather and home. He thought about the man he'd been 2 decades earlier, angry, broken, convinced he didn't deserve happiness. And he thought about the man he was now, still flawed, still carrying scars, but whole in the ways that counted. The transformation hadn't been clean or easy. There had been setbacks and struggles, nights when the past felt too heavy to carry, and days when the future seemed impossible to build. But they'd done it anyway, piece by piece, choice by choice, learning to trust that tomorrow might be better than today. That evening, after dinner, Cole and Leon May sat on the back steps of the restaurant like they'd done 100 times before. Emily was inside doing homework, visible through the window, and the desert stretched out before them, turning purple in the fading light. "Do you ever think about Red Hollow?" Lian May asked. "Sometimes, not as much as I used to. I heard it's dying. The mine's played out, people leaving, nothing much left except memories and regret." "Good," she laughed. "That's harsh." "It was a harsh place. Let it die." "What about the people who are still there? The ones who spoke up for me? Dr. Peterson, Mrs. Chen's namesake, all of them? They made a choice to stay silent for too long. I hope they learned from it." Cole took her hand. "But that's not our problem anymore. We built something better here." "We did, didn't we?" "Yeah, we really did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day end and the stars emerge. Somewhere inside, Emily laughed at something, bright and carefree, and Cole felt grateful in a way that was almost painful. Grateful for the choice he'd made to intervene, grateful that La and May had survived, grateful that they'd both been brave enough to try building something when running would have been easier. "Cole?" Lian May said. "Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For saving me, for staying, for building this life with me. For being the kind of man who sees someone suffering and decides to care. You already thanked me about 1,000 times. I'll thank you 1,000 more, because every day I wake up free, every day I get to choose what I do and who I am, that's because you cared when no one else did." Cole pulled her close, kissed her temple. "You would have found a way out eventually. You're too stubborn to stay trapped." "Maybe, but you made it happen sooner. You gave me back years I would have lost. That matters. You gave me back my life, showed me what it looks like to turn suffering into strength. We're even. We're not keeping score." "No, we're not." Inside, Emily called for them, needing help with something. They stood together, brushed dust from their clothes, and went to help their daughter with whatever problem seemed insurmountable to a 14-year-old mind. And Cole realized that this was it. This was what redemption looked like. Not some grand gesture or dramatic moment, but the quiet accumulation of ordinary days filled with love and purpose and the knowledge that you'd done something that mattered. He'd cut a woman free from ropes and watched her transform that single act of mercy into an entire life. He'd stayed when every instinct told him to run, and in staying, he'd found the thing he'd been searching for all along, a reason to believe that broken things could be mended and that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. 20 years after that day in Red Hollow, Cole Hart stood in a restaurant his wife owned, watching his daughter laugh, and understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is give someone a chance to save themselves. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they return the favor. The woman the town had tried to shame had become a pillar of her community. The man who'd intervened had discovered that true strength wasn't in violence, but in the willingness to stand firm when it mattered most. Together, they'd created something that neither could have built alone, a future defined not by fear or pain, but by freedom, respect, and a love strong enough to rewrite both their lives. And that, Cole thought, as he helped Emily with her homework while Lian May made tea, was more than enough. It was everything.